Chapter 262. Wu Qi turned his head and gave the three ladies a look, then gave a deep look at Yu Ji, who acted as if nothing had happened. Hastily, he transformed into a stream of yellow mist and plunged into the ground. Lu Buwei had sent someone to assassinate Wu Qi, and he had made it very clear. No one could find fault with him. So, as the left Prime Minister of Great Yan Dynasty, Lu Buwei should not kill the ministers of Great Yan Dynasty? Furthermore, Wu Qi had killed his own granddaughter. So, how could that be considered? Yan Dan did not say a word. There was no such national law in Great Yan Dynasty that restricted the usage of assassins. No matter it was Jing Ku, Tian Guang, or even Qin Wuyang, they were all assassins. Unknowingly and imperceptibly, Great Yan Dynasty had developed a trend of raising assassins, a killing tool known as assassins. When there was a conflict between two clans, using assassins was the most direct way to resolve the conflict. While letting out a long and furious howl, Wu Qi slammed his head into Bai Qi from behind, who was fighting fiercely with Fan Yuqi. Dozens of human immortals of Jin Dan had self-detonated behind him, and the tremendous force of impact had made his speed incredibly fast. In just a blink of an eye, Wu Qi had crossed over 100 miles of distance, and was now less than 1,000 feet away from Bai Qi's back. Wu Qi cried out helplessly. He looked at the dozens of vague figures behind him, then flicked his left wrist and shot out several hundred golden beams shaped like dragon scales, transforming into a stream of light and thrusting straight into Bai Qi's back. Clang! 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 Bai Qi flicked his wrist. Each piece of the golden dragon scales weighed tens of thousands of kilograms, and each piece was terrifyingly fast. After hundreds of collisions, Bai Qi could no longer hold his sword. A long rainbow flew out from his hand, and the sword was sent flying far away. Yu Yao had no other choice. The yellow light unleashed by the formation above her head instantly wrapped around her, transforming into tens of thousands of blades, spears, swords, halberds, and countless armors, blocking the attacks from Yu Tan and Yu Ji. Several loud explosions rang out, and Yu Yao was forced to retreat repeatedly. However, the two women did not show any mercy, and continued to launch attacks that were like a storm. Yu Yao was different from Yu Ji. She, who was better at scheming, did not have such a strong fleshly body. When she was hit by Wu Qi, who was like a small hill, she immediately coughed out a mouthful of blood, and more than half of her bones were broken. Along with the speed at which Wu Qi was flying, the shield struck out with a force of over 2 million kilograms, turning it into a frightening force and smashing right into Bai Qi. Bai Qi's breastplate was shattered, and a stream of blood burst out from his mouth. He was thrown several tens of miles away in a sorry state, and was finally embedded into the cliff of a lofty mountain. Wu Qi could not resist Yu Yao's attack at all. Like a yellow ball, he was knocked flying away by the flute. The tremendous impact made Wu Qi tremble from head to toe, and he nearly threw up a mouthful of blood. "Sister, Yingzheng is destined to die here today. Just let him go." Yu Tan chuckled, then swung the blade down viciously. The sword flew out of Bai Qi's hand. Even though he had gone through hundreds of battles, he was taken aback. "How dare you? How could this be?" he cried out. Yu Yao cursed angrily. Just as she was about to aim the yellow beam unleashed by the formation above her head at Yingzheng, a long crescent blade with coiling dragon emerged gracefully from behind her back, thrusting straight towards Yu Yao's slender neck. Pop! Bai Qi's armor nearly shattered into pieces, while countless cracks appeared on his skin, and blood splashed and splashed in all directions. After being severely wounded by Wu Qi and Fan Yuqi, Bai Qi took a deep breath. Abruptly, the murderous aura emanating from countless soldiers on the battlefield transformed into a white tiger-shaped airwave and rushed into his mouth. The wounds on Bai Qi's skin healed quickly, while his broken bones and large wounds were restored to their original state. The murderous aura of Baiqi's white tiger's soul-slaughtering technique could almost be compared with that of Xiangyu, but when it came to the strength and recovery of his fleshly body, it was far weaker than the body of immortal fiend which Xiangyu had inherited. On top of that, Fan Yuqi's brute force was terrifyingly strong, and the two tiger-headed crescent halberds were both weapons of magical treasure level. With that, he had severely wounded Baiqi with ease. Holding the two tiger-headed crescent halberds in his hands, Fan Yuqi's entire body was shrouded in a yellow glow, and his face was twisted as he fought fiercely with Baiqi. Although Baiqi's speed was at least 50% faster than Fan Yuqi's, his strength was much weaker than Fan Yuqi's. However, Baiqi's fleshly body was definitely not as strong as Fan Yuqi's. He had adopted guerrilla tactics, as he dared not to fight head-on with Fan Yuqi, who was as tough as an iron block. Yu Yao was taken aback, and she bellowed, "How dare you, demon girl!" Since it was a muddled matter, Yan Dan decided to just stand back and play dumb. Even Mod and Sun Kuang had nothing to say. After a brief moment of pondering, Yan Dan, Mod, Sun Kuang, and many other civil and military officials turned their eyes at the same time to look at Lu Buwei, who was standing silently behind Yan Dan like a ghost and was not even breathing. Lu Buwei, who had a stout and graceful appearance like an old man from a wealthy family, smiled faintly, raised his eyelids slightly, and said indifferently, "I did it. Do you have any objections?" Suddenly, Baiqi sensed a mass of sharp energy shooting at him from behind. What shocked him even more was that the sharp energy was shooting right at the internal and external channels through which his white tiger spirit slaughtering kill incantation extracted killing energy and transformed it into his own energy. If these vital acupuncture points were attacked, Baiqi's fighting strength would be greatly affected. Out of pure instinct, Baiqi casually swung his sword behind him. Baiqi, who was fighting Fan Yuqi, relied on his speed to circle around Fan Yuqi and hack at him. Fan Yuqi's armor was shattered, and hundreds of wounds opened up on his body. His entire body was covered in blood. However, as Fan Yuqi cultivated the earthly indestructible body, although his speed was slightly slower, his fleshly body defense was extremely strong. No matter how hard Baiqi hacked at him, he was only injured, but not killed. The injuries looked terrible, but in fact, they did not cause any fatal injuries to Fan Yuqi. Like a sharp blade, the fierce tiger tore through the wisps of pinkish and white mist in the air. Each of the dragon scales was extremely sharp, and because they contained a thread of innate earth element energy essence, constantly absorbing the earth element energy from the surrounding natural energy to replenish themselves, each of these dragon scales weighed more than 50,000 kilograms. The golden beams tore through the air and produced ear-splitting noises, shooting straight towards the 18 vital acupuncture points on Baiqi's back with an immense killing intent. Under the observation of Wu Qi's mystic eyes of universe, these 18 vital acupuncture points were the passageways from Baiqi's back, which were constantly absorbing the killing energies from the surrounding. Watching from afar, Yan Dan and all his ministers were startled by the sudden appearance of Wu Qi, especially when Wu Qi showed up in such a bizarre way. Like a cannonball, he shot towards Baiqi, while several dozens of human figures were chasing after him, hacking at him with swords. From time to time, a few human figures would self-detonate behind him. Furthermore, all those who self-detonated had the cultivation base of Jin Dan's human immortal realm. In the twinkling of an eye, the remaining dozens of men of sacrifice had once again self-detonated behind Wu Qi's back. Wu Qi, who had just knocked Baiqi flying away, let out a miserable howl as his body was once again thrown forward by the explosion, and the momentum was much stronger than before. While howling, his body was shrouded by the bright yellow light transformed from the earth element energy, shooting straight into the ecstasy formation and slamming right into Yu Yao's body. Caught off guard, Yu Yao was thrown up into the air and flew tens of miles away, swaying and wobbling. With the cultivation base of Jin Dan, how could he do such a thing? Cried Yan Dan in shock, who has such a deep grudge against Wu Qi. In Great Yan Dynasty, who has such a deep grudge against him? How could he be willing to use the men of sacrifice with the cultivation base of Jin Dan to assassinate Wu Qi, bastard? Yu Yao bellowed furiously. The jade flute emanated a sheet of green light and smashed forcefully onto Wu Qi's body. Just as his chest heaved up, Baiqi cried out sternly, "Your Majesty, Empress, wake up now. The situation is critical, wake up now." A cold gleam shot out from Lu Buwei's eyes, and for a moment, he was emanating a threatening aura. Apart from a few people, all the civil and military officials of Great Yan Dynasty bowed their heads, not daring to meet Lu Buwei's gaze. Lu Buwei grinned coldly, raised his head up proudly and said, "Killing Wu Qi is a personal grudge, not an official mission. Which national law of Great Yan Dynasty says that I can't activate the assassins kept by my clan to assassinate my enemies?" Baiqi threw his head back and let out a wild roar. White mist burst out from his body like a waterfall, and his voice sounded like the roar of a dragon, causing the clouds in the sky to sway and ripple. Amidst his long and sonorous roar, the murderous aura transformed from the countless Qin soldiers killed by the machines from Mo sect transformed into a ferocious tiger with blood stains all over its body. While letting out a drawn-out roar, the tiger sprung into the hot spring where Ing Zheng and Yu Yao were trapped by the formation. Then, he waved the jade flute, and a tune as clear as the cry of a phoenix rang out. A pale yellow formation suddenly emerged above Yu Yao's head, shooting out a large sheet of majestic and solemn yellow flame towards the group of fox ladies who had trapped Ing Zheng. The many courtiers standing around Yan Dan exchanged glances, and none of them said a word. It was a fact that Wu Qi had offended many people. But, among these people he had offended, none of them would be so extravagant as to use the self-explosion of a Jin Dan human immortal to kill Wu Qi. Even Yu Yi, whose youngest son was killed by Wu Qi, would not send so many Jin Dan cultivators to assassinate Wu Qi by self-explosion. This time, Wu Qi did not flee. Instead, he hid under the ground, watching the fight between the three ladies from a distance. Originally, Baiqi should not be so useless. But, when he forcibly controlled the bone of dragoning last time, his cultivation base was severely damaged. Although he had used some spirit pills to heal and restore his cultivation base, it had only been a few months, and his current cultivation base was still far away from the peak stage nascent soul realm. His overall strength had been greatly weakened. On top of that, the Earth Element Dragon Scale Shield was an innate magical item, which contained a massive amount of power. As Baiqi had placed 70% of his attention on Fan Yuqi, he was caught off guard, and his sword was knocked away by Wu Qi. Yu Ji, who had changed into a bright red dress that was as red as fire, silently appeared beside Yu Yao like a ball of flame spirit. Two small fists pierced through the air with an ear-piercing sound as they smashed straight towards Yu Yao's ribs. At the same time, Wu Qi threw himself into Baiqi's arms, smashing his left wrist shield forcefully onto Baiqi's chest. The Earth Element Dragon Scale Shield was crafted using innate Earth Element Energy Essence, which weighed over 2 million kilograms. Although it was refined into a magical treasure by Wu Qi, to Wu Qi, it was as light as a feather, as if it weighed nothing. But to the others, it was as heavy as a huge mountain. Sitting in the chariot, Yu Yao's body trembled as if she had sensed something, and she abruptly rose to her feet. She glanced around in astonishment, then suddenly tightened her grip on the jade flute. A large sheet of bright light burst out from the feathers of the one phoenix, dispersing some of the enchanting pink scent in the surroundings. She calmed her mind and looked down, and she saw Ing Zheng being entangled by a group of beautiful girls. More or less, there were white fox tails poking out from the back of these girls, wrapping around Ing Zheng like a huge white cocoon. He was struck dumb for a moment, but Fan Yuqi did not. Seeing that Baiqi's body turned stiff and was caught unprepared by Wu Qi, Fan Yuqi gave a muffled snort. A stream of yellow mist towered a few miles high from the top of his head, producing a loud whistle that sounded like the whistle of a huge ship. Then, he thrust his halberd twice and viciously hit Baiqi's body. One of the halberd pierced through Baiqi's left rib, and the other smashed onto Baiqi's right shoulder, nearly shattering half of his body. Chapter 263. A long, shrill, and extremely anxious bugle call was heard coming from afar. Troops of Qin soldiers were seen treading on wing-shaped magical items, approaching at top speed from the place where the heaven and the earth met, like dark clouds that blotted the sky and blotted the earth. The man who led the Qin army was Ing Ziying. The 8 crocodiles hovering above his head let out deafening dragon roars, while the spears held in their hands sprinkled with specks of golden light. Wherever they went, they would wipe out all who stood in their way. No matter it was the elite soldiers of Great Yen or the mighty soldiers of Great Chu, as long as they were soldiers or captains who stood in Ing Ziying's way, they would have their throats pierced by his spear. Within 10 miles of where Ing Ziying went, not a single enemy was left alive. Countless spear beams pierced through the sky, and countless elite soldiers of Great Chu and Great Yen fell to the ground with blood spraying out from their mouths. None of them could withstand even one round of attack from Ing Ziying's spear. Looking at Ing Ziying, who was charging towards them with a towering murderous aura, Jing Ke pulled out a dagger and said coolly, "Let me kill this kid." Qin Wuyang licked his lips and said in a cold voice, "Don't fight with me this time." No matter what, Ing Ziying was once the king of Qin. It will be satisfying to kill him. Mod said coolly, "Chief generals, don't be impulsive. There is no need for you to strike yet." As Mod's voice rang out, a few lofty mountains 1,000 miles away suddenly began to tremble. All of a sudden, the mountains crumbled and crumbled, revealing a large hole underneath the ground. Right in front of the charging Qin army, a city made entirely of iron and steel was abruptly thrust high up into the sky by a several tens of feet thick crimson pillar of flame, hovering right before the formation of Qin army while emanating a frightening heat. This city was Imo City, and it was on the tower located right in the center of this city that Wu Qi met Mod for the first time. He could not believe that such a large iron and steel city was secretly transported to this place, and was secretly placed underground for an ambush. With the help of the underground energy vein of earth fire, Mo City was supplied with sufficient energy. The crimson pillars of earth flame kept smashing into the energy core of Mo City, activating the countless talismans and restrictive spells inside and outside the city. The dazzling and blinking Mo City looked a few times bigger than its actual size, making it look like a city of heavenly deities. It stood before Ing Ziying's chariot in a rude and unreasonable manner. Along with the appearance of Mo City, numerous rocks were moved away from the surrounding mountains, while numerous disciples of Mo's sect pushed one huge machine after another out from the caves beneath the rocks. Like the cannons that Wu Qi was familiar with, the weapons from Mo's sect had locked onto the Qin army. The underground earth fire energy vein kept supplying a tremendous amount of fire element energies into the armaments of Mo's sect, stimulating these armaments of various sizes and making them shine with a dazzling gleam. Streams of stern aura enveloped the countless Qin soldiers who were charging towards them, while an aura of death emanated from the bottom of their hearts, causing everyone to feel a chill running down their spine. A mountain rock suddenly cracked, and Baiqi, who was covered in blood, flew out from the cliff. He shouted sternly, "Prince Ziying, retreat. These are the armaments of Mo's sect. Ordinary soldiers cannot withstand even a light strike from them. Unless they are cultivators at the level of Jin Dan or above, no one can fight them head-on." Before Baiqi's voice could fade away, tens of thousands of armaments of Mo's sect shot out blinding beams at the same time from several thousand mountains near and far. Large sheets of light rain swept across the sky, piercing through the bodies of countless Qin soldiers, making them fall stiffly to the ground while howling miserably. Deep, muffled booms kept ringing out, while some especially heavy armaments trembled and shot out beams of several tens of feet thick. When these armaments were activated, the underground energy veins were boiling and rocking, and the mountain ridges where these armaments were located were shaking violently. The tremendous counterforce caused countless cracks to appear on the mountain ridges. A great amount of earth element energy sprayed out from the cracked mountain ridges, while the bright beams tore through the void and plunged into the tightly packed formation of Qin soldiers. The bright beams exploded, turning large groups of Qin soldiers into nothingness amidst them. No matter if they were Xiantian or Hotian cultivators, or even human immortals of early-stage Jin Dan, under the storm-like attack of these armaments of mass destruction, which were made with the secret technique of Mo sect, they could only be beaten passively, turning into wisps of green smoke that drifted away in the air. Only human immortals of early-stage Jin Dan or above, earth immortals of nascent soul realm, and cultivators who owned defensive treasures of magical treasure level could survive this devastating attack. Ying Ziying only had several thousand middle and senior captains, and several tens of thousands of practitioners who came along as reinforcements. Only then could they barely form a formation, relying on the restrictive runes unleashed by these practitioners to struggle and survive amidst the waves of destruction. In just the time it took to finish a pot of tea, countless Qin soldiers were ripped to shreds under the intense attack of these several tens of thousands of medium and large armaments. For a moment, the battlefield fell into a dead silence. The captains who were fighting each other could not help but stop their attacks. Even Yu Ji, Yu Tan, and Yu Yao, who were having a great time fighting each other, stopped their attacks in a daze, staring blankly at the direction where a large number of Qin soldiers were completely destroyed. Yu Yao was shivering as she looked at the direction, murmuring under her breath, "So many people, so many elites. How could it be so short? How long has it been?" Suddenly, Mod took a deep breath and said with a clear voice, "Gentlemen, it is no longer the same as it was in the past, and this place is not our hometown. Forget about those methods of siege and slaughter in those years. Everything is different now. Even if you have an army of 10 million soldiers, under the attack of powerful magical items and talismans, we can easily wipe them out." Mod smiled faintly and continued in a soft voice, "Actually, now that Great Yan, Great Chu, and Daqin are at war with each other, as long as we, the leading cultivators, can determine the winner, it is meaningless for those soldiers who are below Jin Dan realm to participate in the war. It is just a matter of losing more blood." Hiding under the ground, Wu Qi could not help but keep nodding his head. He was right. It was just like how the human beings on Earth had invented the nuclear bomb, the kind that could be used without any restrictions. What was the point of ordinary soldiers fighting in such a war? It was more than enough to determine the rise and fall of a kingdom by using the powers of the upper echelons. Under such circumstances, it was meaningless for Daqin to dispatch millions of soldiers to wage war against other kingdoms. It was nothing more than giving Mo sect more military credit, and making Qin army shed more blood. Suddenly, Mo city began to tremble violently, with countless runes blinking and blinking on its surface. Accompanied by a deafening rumble, the column of earth flame that rushed out from the ground suddenly expanded to 1,000 feet in diameter, while an enormous amount of earth flame energy kept rushing into Mo city. Then, a light cry was heard coming from the top of Mo city. A section of the city wall facing Ying Ziying and his men slowly slid to two sides, revealing a pitch-black metal cylinder that glinted with a dazzling light. The energy equivalent to all the energies possessed by 100 peak stage nascent soul earth immortals was gathered in the cylinder. After that, it transformed into a violent thunderbolt, whistling out from the cannon and smashing right into the center of the defensive formation deployed by Ying Ziying and his men. The thunderbolt was less than 10 feet in diameter, yet it contained all the energies possessed by 100 peak stage nascent soul earth immortals. It tore through the defensive formation effortlessly, pierced through the bodies of several hundred Qin generals and practitioners, and burned them into wisps of ashes in just a blink of an eye. The thunderbolt did not lose its momentum. It went straight through the formation, traveled over 1,000 miles, and plunged into a mountain range off in the distance. A blinding light shot out from the horizon, and amidst the blinding light, a large patch of the mountain range turned into nothingness in just a blink of an eye. Ying Ziying was careless, and the thunderbolt brushed past his body. He gave a muffled snort as a large piece of muscle on his shoulder was charred, and his body was knocked flying far away by the tremendous force contained in the thunderbolt. Suddenly, he coughed out a mouthful of blood, which was filled with blinking electric arcs. Ying Ziying stared blankly at the Mo city before him, as well as the countless war machines of Mo sect in the surroundings. He could not say a word for a long while. The timing, the geographical location, and the combination of manpower, Great Yan and Great Chu had occupied all the advantages. On the other hand, because of Ying Zheng's reckless advance, Daqin had fallen into the most embarrassing situation. When the ferocious claws of Mo sect were completely exposed, the mighty army of Daqin, who had once unified the world over 2,000 years ago, was so weak that it could not even withstand a single blow. Just as Mod had said, the times had changed, and so had the people. Even if there were several 100 million ordinary soldiers, they were just cannon fodder. Nowadays, in the struggle for hegemony among all the kingdoms, the winner would be determined through cultivators with profound cultivation base. Not to mention those ordinary soldiers below the realm of Jin Dan, even cultivators of Jin Dan realm did not have the qualification to join the struggle that would decide the fate of a kingdom. Mod had used a bloody fact to give Yan Dan and Chu Ping, who were present at the scene, a most realistic lesson. The war now was completely different from the war in the past. Yan Dan took a deep breath, gave Mod a look of utmost reverence, and said, "Ing Ziying, bring the rest of the men and retreat. Today, we will claim Ing Zheng's life." Without the Emperor of Qin, without the Imperial Seal, without the Cauldron of Yu, Daqin. Hiding underground, Wu Qi could not help but shake his head. Without the Emperor of Qin, Ing Zheng, without the Imperial Seal, and without the Cauldron of Yu, would Daqin still be the Daqin? All of a sudden, a wild and long laugh rang out, "Cut the bullshit. Release my father, or else, I'll drag Great Yen and Great Chu down with me. Obediently send my father and all the other generals and ministers out, or else, we'll all perish together." An ear-splitting clanking of iron chains rang out, as a prisoner cart wrapped in a dark cloud came flying towards them at top speed. Hiding underground, Wu Qi could not help but poke half of his head out from the ground. Sure enough, it was a prisoner cart amidst the dark cloud. It measured 80 feet in both width and length, and stood about 30 feet tall, and was surrounded by a thick iron fence. There was an iron table and an iron bookshelf in the cart, and a man with disheveled hair and messy clothes, with both his wrists and ankles chained up by iron chains, was sitting behind the iron table and laughing loudly. The man's face was covered by his long hair, and through the gaps between his hair, a pair of ferocious and crazy eyes that looked like those of a mad dog could be seen. Within those eyes, which were blinking with a blinding green gleam, there was no emotion that a normal human should have, only countless crazy and negative emotions. While laughing evilly, he cried out sternly, "Yan Dan, Chu Ping, get the hell out here right now, you two poor wretches. Hee, are you the ones who have trapped my father? Not bad, you are much stronger than those years. TSK, I really want to chop off your heads and use them as urinals." Chu Ping, his face pale and body drenched in sweat, suddenly appeared right next to Yan Dan. He said in a low voice, "Gigazi possesses an unfathomable cultivation base, and he has broken free from Chu Ping's restraint. I don't know where he is now." Yan Dan gave Chu Ping a startled look, then said in a low voice, "Don't worry, the outcome has been decided. In just a moment, all the energies in Ing Zheng's body will be devoured by the Master of Enchantment Palace, and his soul is destined to perish today. No one can save him." Taking a deep breath, Yan Dan asked in a loud and clear voice, "Who are you? How dare you speak such arrogant words?" The prisoner chariot flew to the front of Mo City, laughing wickedly as he said, "I'm the Prince of Sin of Great Qin, Hu Hai. Hee, I'm sure all of you have heard of my name. Release my father, or else, the 23 kingdoms to the west of Great Yen Kingdom will all sink, and all the people will die in an instant." Wu Qi shuddered, then abruptly leaped out from under the ground and cried out, "What did you say, Hu Hai?" Yan Dan shuddered as well, and he roared furiously, "What have you done, Hu Hai?" Hu Hai just laughed wildly and said, "Release my father, or else we will all perish together. Hee, I don't care about benevolence, righteousness, and morality. If you don't obey my will, even if I'm struck by lightning and have my bones crushed to pieces, my soul destroyed, and I'll never be able to reincarnate, I'll never be afraid. Hee, I'll count to 3, and if I don't see my father by then, all the people in the 23 kingdoms to the west of Great Yen Kingdom will be buried together with my father." Hu Hai raised both hands up in the air, laughed wildly and said, "Heaven, fuck your birth mother." "Huh, one." A dead silence fell over the place, and no one dared to say a word. Chapter 264. The several dozens of fox girls in the hot spring slowly dispersed, revealing Ing Zheng and Su Meier. Ing Zheng, whose skin was as pale as snow, was barely breathing. He was lying on the back of a huge six-tailed fox, and his body was twitching unnaturally. After hearing Yan Dan's order, Su Mei, who had transformed into her true form of a white fox, coiled up Ingzheng with her two long tails and slowly threw him into the hot spring nearby. She raised her head lazily, narrowed her purple eyes into two thin lines, and gave Yan Dan a lazy look as she said, "Your Majesty, I'm just a little bit away from becoming a heaven immortal." While the word 3 was still lingering on the tip of Hu Hai's tongue, Yan Dan had already waved his hand with a gloomy face and said, "Send off Your Majesty Ingzheng." All of a sudden, the surrounding mountains began to move, as a large number of soldiers from both Yan and Chu appeared. These soldiers, who were supposed to be used to deal with the reinforcements of Qin army, now had no choice but to form into a formation and watch Ingzheng and the emperor and ministers of Daqin leave this place. Su Fu moved his fingers and crushed the pill bottle, from which he took out a strange spirit pill, the size of a baby's fist, shaped like a grain seed, green in color, and emitting a delicate fragrance. Wu Qi, who was watching their movements, was shocked. A spirit pill that could mimic the shape of a living creature under the heaven had gone beyond the category of an ordinary spirit pill, and should be considered as an immortal pill. Yan Dan nodded and said, "I'll naturally compensate Imperial Advisor for this." Everyone turned to look at Wu Qi and Hu Hai. Wu Qi's question was what everyone present, including the generals of Qin army, wanted to know. Even Ing Ziying was looking at Hu Hai with a strange and complicated look in his eyes. Uncle Wang, are you really confident that you can rescue?" he murmured. "Baiqi, who is the general in charge of the scouting work today?" Ingzheng cried out in a loud voice. Ingzheng's body trembled violently as he stared at Lu Buwei and roared at the top of his voice, "Why? Why you?" With an unsightly expression on their faces, Su Fu and Li Si flew down from the sky and carefully came next to Ingzheng. Su Fu took out a light golden pill bottle and glanced at Su Mei. Su Mei pondered for a brief moment, then nodded her head slowly. She coiled her long tail twice around Ingzheng's neck, controlling his life and death in her palm. Only then did she nod her head and said, "Feed him some spirit pills, but don't try to buy time." This empress almost sucked all of his cultivation. Just a little bit more time, really. He cared about the life and death of Ingzheng, and he cared about the outcome of the three kingdoms. Even if the people of the Yan kingdom died, it would have nothing to do with him. However, the Meng village in the past, the current Meng fortress, was within the range of Hu Hai's threat. Could the 23 western kingdoms of Great Yan possibly sink? How was this possible? How could this be done? Hu Hai was a madman. He was the culprit who had disrupted the politics of the Qin state and caused the death of Daqin. How could he do such a crazy thing? After talking for a while, Hu Hai became a little impatient. "Release my father, or just let those 23 kingdoms be buried with my father. Brother Hu Hai is still in Xianyang. Even if the emperor is changed, Daqin, will not collapse. Release him, or not, I'll count to 3. As Hu Hai roared, a mountainous area tens of thousands of miles in circumference behind Yan Dan and others suddenly collapsed. A huge mountain ridge, together with several outposts of Great Yan, sank into the ground at the same time. A tremendous tremor came, and the collapsed mountain ridge formed a pit that was about 100 miles deep. A great amount of underground water spewed out of the ground and slowly poured into the pit. The sun was shining high up in the sky, and the sunlight shone straight into the pit. The bottom of the pit was sparkling, and it was a beautiful scene of lakes and mountains. Hu Hai took a deep breath and said slowly, "Tell those foxes to stop and release my father, or else." 2. Baiqi turned around abruptly. A few beams of light had already flown up from the Qin army's camp and quickly joined Great Yan's army. With great reverence, the few Qin generals knelt to Lu Buwei, who stood behind Yan Dan, and said in a booming voice, "We offer greeting, Patriarch." Hu Hai laughed in a deep voice. Suddenly, a thick layer of black mist spread out of his body like waves, wheeling rapidly around him. All of a sudden, the shrill howls of demons rang out, and the black mist around Hu Hai turned into a black ocean that measured about 100 miles in circumference. Numerous black lotuses began to grow rapidly from the ocean. The leaves of the black lotuses were swaying in the wind, and the lotuses were blooming slowly. On each black lotus the size of a bowl, there was a small fiend statue sitting cross-legged, with a ferocious-looking face and a wheel of bright black light hovering behind its head. Lu Bue looked at Ing Zheng with a complicated expression. After a long while, he said coolly, 3 of my sons were captured alive by Great Yen. For them, I have become the left Prime Minister of Great Yen, King of Wenxian. Hu Hai laughed strangely. As he was about to say something, a water column suddenly shot up into the sky from the dark river in the distance. Wanying Dragon King's body was badly burned, and his skin and flesh were still smoking. He roared out with a stern voice, someone has taken control of Longyuan River, Dark Dragon River, and Coiling Dragon River, the 3 main water veins in the eastern part of Meng Mountains. The Dragon Kings of Dark Dragon River and Coiled Dragon River have sent me a letter through the water channel, saying that the few cores of the earth veins in Great Yen's territory where their tributaries flow through are also under someone's control. The strange laughter rang out again, and Hu Hai said in a deep voice, I don't think I need to say more, do I? What I'm cultivating is the divine ability of Earth Fiend of Great Constellation and Great Constellation. I have the strength of millions of fiend gods and fiends in my body, and I can control all the earth veins and water veins. The underground earth veins of Great Yen are not guarded by any treasure, and I can easily control them. With the earth veins in my hands, isn't it a piece of cake to sink the land tens of millions of miles wide? Ing Zheng pondered for a while, then smiled and said, Chu Ping has used the art of ghost deity to prevent old Mr. Gigazi from foreseeing my dangerous situation. Someone among the generals of Daqin has been bribed. Otherwise, I would have sent out a great number of scouts before I came here, and they would have found some clues. Hu Hai gave Ing Zheng a look, who had half of his body soaked in the hot spring, and once again let out a disturbing laugh. Su Fu, Li Si, give my father a life-saving spirit pill first, he said in a deep voice. What did you advisors eat when you were growing up? How could you put my father in such a perilous situation? I really should have killed your entire clan. Especially the hundreds of millions of common people of the 23 dynasties. If they were killed because of his wrong decision, just the enormous karma alone, as well as the inner demons that Yen Dan had stirred up because of it, would make him doomed eternally, and it would not take long before he was completely devoured by the enormous karma. Yen Dan and Chu Ping's faces darkened. They wanted to ask the same question, but for the sake of the dignity of the emperor, how could they accept Hu Hai's threat? The fact that Wu Qi had jumped out and asked the question was exactly what they wanted. They did not say a word, but just fixed their eyes on Hu Hai in the distance. Chu Ping was in a better condition, and his expression was calm. But Yen Dan was so nervous that cold sweat kept breaking out from the nape of his neck, flowing down his back like a stream. Yen Dan's face turned pale in an instant, while all the military officers of Great Yen slowly retreated, breaking away from the contact with the Qin generals. Tian Guang, Fan Yuqi, Yu Yi, and the other generals exchanged glances with each other in panic. It seemed that this Hu Hai was not just trying to scare them, and he was not talking nonsense. Yes, replied Yen Dan in a low voice. Su Meier nodded. Suddenly, one of her long tails tightened and shrunk to the size of a child's arm. At the end of it was a sharp silver spear, which was pressed tightly against the vital spot between Ing Zheng's brows. She giggled and said, Hu Hai, if you can't tell me the cause and effect that will satisfy me, I'll just have to do this lightly, and Ing Zheng will become a dead man. Chu Ping's body trembled as well. Using the quickest speed he could mutter, he said in a low voice, I have no idea what kind of fiend cultivation technique this Hu Hai is cultivating. Chu Ping is able to communicate with ghosts and deities under the heaven and earth, but before he could figure out what exactly happened to the mountain ghosts and deities in the collapsed mountain ridge, the mountain ridge suddenly collapsed. Ing Zheng's body trembled, and he struggled to jump up. But, with a flick of Su Meier's tail, how could Ing Zheng, who had suffered a great loss of energy, move? Cold sweat broke out from Wu Qi's forehead. More and more cold sweat was breaking out from Yen Dan's body. He roared out hoarsely, Grand Imperial Advisor Su, please stop for the time being, let go of Ing Zheng. Carefully, Li Si pried open Ing Zheng's jaws, and Su Fu gently placed the pill into Ing Zheng's mouth. Then, he covered Ing Zheng's mouth with his hand, and a sizzling noise could be heard coming from Ing Zheng's mouth. The pill was vaporizing, quickly flowing through Ing Zheng's mouth and esophagus into his stomach, then circulating through his entire body. It made his skin take on a greenish hue, like that of a willow tree that had just sprouted in spring, filled with vigorous life force. In just the time of a few breaths, Ing Zheng suddenly took a deep breath and slowly opened his eyes. His entire body was shrouded in a dark mist, from which 6 shadows of flood dragons, which were extremely dim and looked as if they could be destroyed at any time, slowly revealed themselves. Ing Zheng narrowed his eyes, using his divine will to sense the condition of his body and the surrounding situation. Suddenly, he laughed aloud and said, "Yan Dan, Chu Ping, have you joined hands and schemed against me?" Standing on top of a cloud, Wu Qi cried out sternly, "Cut the crap. Hu Hai, what trick did you use? 23 kingdoms to the west of Great Yen have a territory that stretches for tens of millions of miles. How could you let them sink at the same time?" Baiqi was so angry that he leaped and roared, while Ing Zheng turned to look at Lu Buwei. When he laid his eyes on Lu Buwei for the first time, his body could not help but tremble, and his entire face began to twitch. Lu Buwei narrowed his eyes and gave Ing Zheng a look. Suddenly, he breathed out a deep sigh and said, "So many people have joined hands to deal with you, but they still failed to kill you. Your Majesty, you are much stronger than those years." The pill was shaped like a seed of a grain, and it was green and translucent, hiding a delicate fragrance. Obviously, it contained a miraculous life force, the kind of pill that could prolong one's life and replenish one's prime energy. The divine ability of great and small constellations Earth Fiends? Wu Qi memorized the name of this divine ability. There seemed to be a similar inherited cultivation technique in Scroll of Stealing. However, the cultivation technique did not focus on destroying the underground energy veins. Instead, it focused more on controlling the underground energy veins, using the power of the underground energy veins to break all kinds of defensive formations, and tracking all kinds of natural treasures by following the underground energy veins. Yan Dan dared not to bear the loss of the lives of the people of 23 kingdoms. Hu Hai could go crazy and kill at all costs, but he, Yan Dan, dared not. Hu Hai's mental state was not right. Obviously, he had gone crazy, but Yan Dan was still a normal person. These fiends had ferocious and frightening faces, and the aura emanating from them was evil and filthy. But, they were sitting cross-legged, their palms locked into lotus incantations and placed before their dantian, while slowly reciting scriptures that advised people to do good deeds. Tens of thousands of little fiends were reciting scriptures at the same time, advising people to be filial to their parents, to love their brothers, to respect their teachers, and to respect the heaven and earth. In Meng village, there were Wu Qi's saviors, his first group of friends and brothers in this world. He could not let them perish together with the 23 kingdoms that sank to the bottom of the continent. Stepping on a cloud, Wu Qi flew up into the sky and roared with all his might, "Hu Hai, tell me, what evil method did you use? How did you make the 23 kingdoms sink to the bottom of the continent?" As Ing Zheng's chariot flew away, Yan Dan and Chu Ping breathed out a long sigh together and said, "From now on, there will be too many troubles." Great Yen was the foundation he had built with his own hands. If the 23 Western kingdoms really sank to the bottom of the continent in an instant, Yan Dan would never be able to forgive himself. Chapter 265. The defense of Meng Fortress was so tight that it even made the current Wu Qi feel troubled. Chu Ping stayed in Meng Fortress, personally modifying the defense and early warning system of Meng Fortress. One after another, countless wild mountain ghosts and deities stood side by side, back to back, from the sky all the way to the ground, forming a huge sphere that firmly sealed the entire Meng Fortress. In the face of such a shameless defense, Wu Qi could only sigh helplessly. With his current cultivation, no matter how miraculous his innate movement technique was, it was impossible for him to pass through the bodies of these mountain ghosts and deities without being noticed. In the later parts of Scroll of Stealing, there were even more magical escape arts that could achieve this, but it was not something that Wu Qi could perform with his current strength. The resentful Wu Qi hated the feeling of being trapped in a cage. He simply told Lu Qingfeng about it and moved to the mountain peak outside the city guarded by the heaven-splitting swordsmanship sect. At least, the restriction in the forest that the heaven-splitting swordsmanship sect was responsible for defending could not stop Wu Qi from coming in and out at will. Ever since he failed at the last step during the day and was forced to letting Jin go. Thus, under the anxious presence of Yan Dan and Chu Ping, all the important ministers of Great Chu and Great Yan had gathered together, discussing how to deal with the problem of Daqin. The two countries were not afraid of Daqin's army and cultivators. However, Huhai's great and great constellation Earth demons were impossible to guard against. Once he succeeded, the lives within a radius of 10 million miles would be plunged into misery and suffering, and the people of both countries would suffer heavy casualties. They had to come up with a complete countermeasure. Therefore, Yan Dan and Chu Ping summoned all the ministers and began to come up with various countermeasures. The officials attending the secret conference were too high in rank. Wu Qi did not qualify to attend. He did not have the time to deliver the books he had taken from Zhang Yi. Nowadays, Wu Qi had become more and more careful. For the cultivation techniques of Great Qin's generals, unless he handed them over to Yan Dan himself, and let Yan Dan personally mark his contribution, he would rather keep them in his hands than hand them over to him through some unreliable people. Since Lu Buwei could plant his disciples among the generals of Qin army, what about Great Yan army? Wu Qi was not willing to take the risk. Standing on the peak of the mountain, Wu Qi was looking down at the countless wild ghosts and deities in the sky above Meng Fortress. He could not help but have his lips drawn together. Activating the mystic eyes of universe, he could see countless ghosts and deities densely covering the ground, forming a dense line of defense. These ghosts and deities wandered back and forth, their Yin deity's spiritual qi causing the moonlight in the sky to fluctuate violently. The moonlight was hazy and constantly created thousands of ripples. It illuminated the surrounding forest and made it seem like a dream or an illusion. The disciples of Heaven-Breaking Sword sect who were on night duty were talking and laughing in low voices. During the last few days of war, Heaven-Breaking Sword sect was not sent to the front line. Now that Ing Zheng was severely wounded, and Qin army would not launch an attack for a long time, the situation of the war had suddenly become relaxed. Therefore, the disciples of Heaven-Breaking Sword sect were in the mood to talk and laugh. While Wu Qi was looking around, he suddenly saw the city gate of Meng Fortress open tens of miles away. Yu Ji, clad in a red robe and looking like a ball of raging flame, was seen drifting out of the fortress, escorted by a troop of armored soldiers. After that, she summoned a cloud and flew towards the southern forest. Wu Qi pondered for a brief moment, then abruptly transformed into a clump of green mist and blended into the surrounding forest, chasing after her at lightning speed. She was his first woman. Wu Qi could not accept the way she treated him. Since the war had stopped, and he had some free time, Wu Qi decided to have a good talk with her, and find out the reason why she did that. The cultivation technique she was cultivating, the innate energy essence she had condensed in her body, was she going to give it up just like that? Xiang Yu was her lover, and she did not want to leave this innate energy essence to him. What was the reason behind this? With the nourishment of this innate energy essence, perhaps Xiang Yu could escape the calamity of demonization, and perhaps he could step into the realm of heaven immortal. However, she chose to have a one-night stand with Wu Qi, and gave up this innate energy essence for nothing. If not because Wu Qi was cultivating with a rare innate cultivation technique, this innate energy essence would have been completely wasted. The celestial technique of goddess Xian cultivated by Yu Ji was a profound and unpredictable one. Not only could her fleshly body defend against blades and swords, she was also unafraid of water and fire, and the speed of her cloud was extremely fast. There was a troop of about 1,000 armored soldiers escorting Yu Ji. Beneath their feet were some jade talismans, which could increase their flying speed. However, even with the help of the talismans, and their cultivation base was not low, they were still left far behind by Yu Ji after flying for tens of miles. In just a blink of an eye, they could no longer catch up with her. No matter how impatient these armored soldiers were and how they burned their blood essence to keep flying, Yuji's flying speed was simply too fast. How could they possibly catch up with her? Yuji's speed was frighteningly fast. Even with Wu Qi's current innate would escape art, he was still far from being able to catch up with her. The celestial technique of goddess Xian was an extremely profound ancient divine ability. Her cultivation base was also much higher than Wu Qi's, as she was an expert who had stepped into the realm of nascent divinity. Therefore, after flying for tens of miles, she had also left Wu Qi far behind. Fortunately, there were all kinds of mystic techniques in Scroll of Stealing. Wu Qi clenched his teeth and made up his mind. He simply exercised the mystic technique of burning his blood, which he could only use when he was fleeing for his life. His speed increased by 10 times, and only then did he barely manage to catch up with Yuji's cloud. Sensing the rapid burning of blood essence in his body, Wu Qi could not help but have an urge to cry, but no tears would come out. During the day, in order to lure Zheng into the trap, he was severely wounded by the flying swords, and he had yet to receive the reward promised by Yan Dan and Chu Ping. Now, in the middle of the night, in order to chase after Yuji, he had to burn his blood essence and risk his life. If not for the fact that the chariot of 8 horses was too magnificent, and would attract too much attention in the middle of the night, Wu Qi would have activated the chariot and used it as his mode of transportation. After chasing after her for several tens of thousands of miles, when Wu Qi was so tired that he nearly threw up blood, Yuji suddenly stopped the cloud and turned into the side of a lofty mountain. At the foot of this lofty mountain, several thousand elite soldiers were seen flying the banner of Xiang. On the side of the mountain, there was a huge cave entrance, from which a great amount of murderous blood aura was spraying out. Wu Qi panted for a while outside the cave entrance, swallowed a few drops of dragon blood essence to replenish his energy, and swallowed 2 demon cores to replenish his energy. Only then did he carefully exercise the escape art of innate earth element and sneak into the cave. The cave was heavily guarded as well. From the entrance all the way to the bottom of the cave, all the way was guarded by elite soldiers of Xiang clan, clad in heavy armors and shrouded in roiling fiend energies. These elite soldiers were much stronger than those elite soldiers of Xiang clan outside the cave. Basically, all these elite soldiers he met along the way had formed fiend pearls in their bodies, and their cultivation base was comparable to nascent soul cultivators. After traveling along the long cave for a while, Wu Qi came to the end of the cave. It was a cave about 1 mile in circumference, and right in the middle of the cave was a huge pit dug out by human hands. A great amount of blood essence of demon beasts was poured into the pit, filling the air with a pungent smell of blood. Xiang Yu's fleshly body had recovered, and he was now standing in the pool of blood, with only his eyes showing. Vaguely, countless tiny vortexes were formed in the blood pool, and the natural energies in the surroundings were constantly being sucked into these vortexes, slowly injecting into Xiang Yu's body. The banner of Qi Yu was hovering above his head. On the banner, countless ferocious celestial fiends were waving their weapons and letting out soundless cries. Xiang Ta, Xiang Zhuang, and several dozens of burly men were standing right next to the blood pool. An old man, who looked to be in his 50s, had a delicate face and a graceful bearing, was sitting on a stone stool next to the blood pool, staring coldly at Yuji, who just walked into the cave. Obviously, this old man was the leader of Xiang Ta and his men. When they saw Yuji, although their eyes were about to burst into flames, and the hot-tempered Xiang Zhuang even had his palm pressed on the hilt of his sword, the old man did not say a word, and neither did any of them make a move. The old man did not move, the people of Xiang clan did not move, and even Xiang Yu, who was soaking in the blood pool, remained motionless. Clad in a blood-red long dress, Yuji walked slowly to the edge of the blood pool. She looked at Xiang Yu, who was soaking in the thick blood pool with only his eyes exposed. Suddenly, she laughed coldly and said, "Do you hate me, resent me, or want to kill me?" The old man cleared his throat and was about to say something, but suddenly, Xiang Yu's deep and powerful voice rang out, "Second father, bring them out. I want to talk to Yuji." The old man, the second father whom Xiang Yu respected, frowned. But before he could say anything, Xiang Yu had already continued, get out. I am not as impulsive as I used to be. After pondering for a brief moment, Fan Zeng slowly rose to his feet and walked out without saying a word. Xiang Ta and Xiang Zhuang glared angrily at Yu Ji, snorted coldly a few times, and followed closely behind Fan Zeng. Yu Ji gave Fan Zeng and the people of Xiang clan a glance with a smile, then slowly sat down on the stone stool where Fan Zeng was sitting just now. It has been a long time since we last met, she said softly. The people of Xiang clan have grown stronger. I don't even know many of them. Are they the people who came from Great Chu after hearing that you were severely wounded by someone? Xiang Yu stared coldly at Yu Ji and said in a deep voice, yes. They are all new members of the Xiang clan. They are my younger brothers and nephews. Yu Ji chuckled and said, I thought they were your children and grandchildren. After a moment of silence, Xiang Yu said coolly, I have no children. I don't have any concubines or wives. Years ago, when you committed suicide at the foot of Gaixia, Xiang Yu did not say another word, and neither did Yu Ji. Wu Qi, who was hiding under the ground, frowned. Over and over again, he kept telling himself that the enmity between him and Xiang Yu was too deep. But he always felt that he was innocent. He was really innocent. After a full quarter of an hour, Yu Ji finally giggled. With a flip of her palm, a small bronze bottle about 1 foot tall appeared in her palm, filled with pale purple blood. The blood was emitting a strange fragrance, and there was an unimaginably huge fiend energy rolling and rocking out from it. Looking at Xiang Yu in the blood pool, she said coolly, I heard that I was raped, and then I told you that I was the one who seduced that little boy Wu Qi. You were so angry and heartbroken, and then you were beaten half to death. After going through all these trials, your Qiyu undying fiend technique should have condensed into a fiend core, right? And your nascent divinity should have transformed into an innate fiend soul, right? And your body should have been forcibly transformed into an immortal fiend body by the Qiyu flag. Did you succeed? Yes, said Xiang Yu in a low, muffled voice. Yu Ji gently pointed her finger at the bottle and said softly, then, fuse this blood essence into your body. This is the only drop of Qiyu true fiend blood in the world. After fusing with it, you will be able to truly start cultivating the Qiyu undying fiend technique. Xiang Yu did not move at all. You purposely provoked me, causing my temperament to change so that I could fuse with my fiend nature, he asked in a deep voice. Yu Ji casually threw the bronze bottle into the blood pool. She sighed faintly and said, maybe, maybe not. I don't know either. She gave Xiang Yu a deep look, sighed and said, we haven't seen each other for over 2,000 years. Xiang Yu's roar that sounded like a muffled thunder rang out from the cave, you are my woman. That little thief, I will spend the rest of my life to kill him. A great amount of blood boiled and rose up, pulling Yu Ji into the blood pool. Under the ground, Wu Qi's eyes turned cold. Soundlessly, he took out the innate gold and silver lotus. Chapter 266. In the blood pool, Yu Ji and Xiang Yu were floating face to face in the sticky blood. Half of their bodies were above the surface of the pool, and the sticky blood kept slipping down their skin. Xiang Yu's deep eyes were fixed on Yu Ji. His eyes were filled with passion and madness. It was a kind of madness that would destroy himself and all other living beings. It was a kind of paranoid madness. In comparison, Yu Ji's gaze was as cold as water, empty and without the slightest hint of emotion, as if she was a hollow puppet. Facing Xiang Yu's aggressive and fanatical gaze, Yu Ji suddenly giggled. With a gentle crooking of her finger, she pulled the small bronze bottle out from the blood pool, then slowly poured Chio's blood essence, which was emitting a strange fragrance, onto Xiang Yu's head. It was exactly a drop of blood essence, the size of an ordinary human head. It was crystal clear, and its surface was glowing with the unique luster of a gemstone. Vaguely, there were millions of illusions of celestial fiends inside it. These celestial fiends had beast heads and human bodies, their faces ferocious and ferocious. Clad in heavy armors and holding sharp weapons, they were fighting and killing each other amidst the misty clouds. Xiang Yu's body was like a dry desert, quickly absorbing the drop of Chiyo's blood essence into his body. Faint sounds of muscles tearing and bones breaking could be heard coming from his body, while a faint layer of red glow covered the surface of his skin. The banner of Chiyu fluttered faintly, resonating with the red glow on Xiang Yu's body. Suddenly, the muffled sound of Xiang Yu's heartbeat rang out in the cave, causing the entire mountain to shake. Wisps of blood-red flame burst out from every pore on Xiang Yu's body, and his long hair turned blood-red as well, swaying behind his head like a ball of raging fire. Gradually, Xiang Yu's body turned translucent, and a large amount of dark smoke rose from it. At the same time, a huge amount of natural energy rushed into his body. Under the control of some strange force, the purest part of the natural energy gradually formed his new body, while the rest of the impure parts were burned into black smoke by the blood-red flame and quickly dissipated into the air. With a threatening flame bursting from his eyes, Xiang Yu stared at Yu Ji and cried out, "Tell me. Why did you do such a thing? Don't shirk the responsibility with words, I want to hear your real reason. Say, why did you do such a thing? Even if you want to do it, you can look for Ying Zheng, Yan Dan, or Chu Ping. Why do you want to look for a kid who hasn't even grown his hair yet?" Yu Ji slowly raised her hands and slowly untied the high bun on her head. Her long dress was swayed by her hands, and the bodice was tightly wrapped around her chest, drawing out a breathtakingly steep arc. Xiang Yu stared at her chest and suddenly began to pant heavily. His body trembled, and his joints made a series of crackling sounds, like beans being fried. She slowly untied her hair bun and let her long hair flow behind her back. Then, she said in a soft voice, "There's no reason for that. I just want to find someone that my Majesty can crush to death with just one finger. If His Majesty is not willing to spare Yu Ji, then I will announce to the world that Yu Ji will be banished. Yu Ji is just a pitiful little girl, while His Majesty is an overlord who has the whole world in his heart. His Majesty should not take a mere girl to heart." With a charming smile, Yu Ji reached out both hands and gently stroked Xiang Yu's cheek. "Before I banish her, there's one more thing I want to tell my Majesty. Li Yuan is cultivating the heaven-breeding script of Goddess Su, while Yu Yao is cultivating the mystic technique of Jade Girls, which is inherited from the Yellow Emperor Xianyuan. Both of them have a thread of innate energy in their bodies, which can help my Majesty break through the barrier between human and immortal. My Majesty, you need to act quickly and seize their bodies." Yu Ji pursed her red lips, narrowed her eyes, and smiled in an extremely charming manner. Her smile was extremely evil, like a black poppy growing in the dark night, filled with a deadly charm. Xiang Yu stared blankly at Yu Ji. Suddenly, his body trembled and said, "Yu Ji, why have you become like this? You..." Vaguely, there was a dark jade gleam shooting out from Yu Ji's eyes, and hidden within it was a faint purple-red evil gleam. Xiang Yu stared into Yu Ji's eyes, and for a moment, he could not control his body. He roared out in a low voice, grabbed Yu Ji's slender and beautiful neck, and tore off all her clothes. Roaring furiously, he leaped forward, courageously plunging into Yu Ji's body amidst the pool of blood. "After so many years, the first thing you do after coming back is to purposely make me sad?" Xiang Yu was like a wild beast that had gone berserk, lunging and fighting on Yu Ji's body in a nearly hysterical manner. The banner of Chiyu was dancing happily, unleashing a great amount of blood-red mist that kept fusing into Xiang Yu's body. Xiang Yu's body became stronger and stronger as he kept slamming and slamming, and the wild and ancient aura emanating from him was getting stronger and stronger. Xiang Yu's chiseled face gradually turned cold, and the last trace of human emotion disappeared from his face. A coldness that could make one shudder was emanating from his body, making him look like a mechanical puppet. Everything was cold and merciless that originated from some kind of consciousness, and no other mixed emotions existed in him anymore. The coldness was so direct, like a peerless divine weapon hidden deep in an armory, born purely for the purpose of killing, without any unnecessary emotions. Yu Ji wrapped her arms around Xiang Yu's neck and murmured under her breath, "This is good, this is good." A king like this will never make a mistake again, and he will never fail again. A king like this will never be defeated again. My king, let all your future enemies tremble under the sharp edge of your weapon. Xiang Yu, the hegemon king of Western Chu, is supposed to be like this. This is how it should be. There will never be a mistake, there will never be a failure. A bloody fiend slowly emerged from behind Xiang Yu's back. It was taller and more muscular than the bloody fiend's shadow that stood in front of Meng Fortress, standing nearly 1,000 feet tall. The fiend's shadow kept absorbing the natural energies in the surroundings, transforming them into a very strong and domineering fiend aura, which was then injected into Xiang Yu's body from a distance. Xiang Yu's aura continued to go through a rapid transformation, becoming even colder, more merciless, and more unapproachable. Wu Qi, I swear I'll kill you. Hee, ha, ha. Xiang Yu clutched Yu Ji's neck tightly with both hands, trying his best to twitch his body while letting out a heartless laugh. The strength of his palms was so great that when his palms rubbed against Yu Ji's soft and beautiful neck, it actually produced a jarring sound of metal clashing and produced a large amount of sparks. Yu Ji's celestial technique of goddess Xian had made her fleshly body extremely strong, and only she could withstand the current Xiang Yu. Apart from the last obsession in his heart, the obsession of killing Wu Qi, Xiang Yu no longer had any emotions that a human should have. He had become so pure, so monotonous, and his fiend's soul was filled with a pure will to fight. Even if the heaven and the earth were standing in his way, he would use his fists, his weapons, and crush the heaven and earth to pieces. Apart from fighting, there was nothing else. The bloody fiend's shadow behind his back was getting clearer and clearer, and the aura emanating from it was getting stronger and stronger. The banner of Qi Yu was draped over the back of the bloody fiend's shadow, like a cloak on a battle armor. More and more natural energies were being absorbed into the banner of Qi Yu, transformed into a very strong fiend aura, and then injected into Xiang Yu's body. Underneath the ground, Wu Qi used a black cloth to wrap his face layer after layer, and at last, only his 2 eyeballs were exposed. He tried his best to change his appearance, then exercised the innate wood element Jin Dan in his 7 stealing heaven meridians, unleashing a thread of Jin Dan aura, changing the strange sign of Jin Dan behind him into a lush green forest shrouded in a green mist. Then, he injected all his energies into the innate gold and silver lotus. The energies of 5 colors shone brilliantly on the petals of the lotus, and were gradually absorbed by the lotus. A wisp of purple-green divine flame of order danced and danced on the lotus throne in the middle of the lotus, giving it a very strange look. From the black dragon spirit ring, Wu Qi found a demon core with a unique smell, carefully extracted a tiny bit of innate core liquid from it, and carefully dripped it onto the front of his shirt. Using the aura of the demon core, Wu Qi covered up the body odor that might have been left on his body. After he was done, he just needed to tear off the front of his shirt and throw it away, and no one would be able to trace him with the smell of the innate core liquid. After doing all this, Wu Qi slowly floated up from the ground. Just when Xiang Yu was sprinting and lashing Yu Ji with all his might, Wu Qi raised his hand, and the silver lotus spun and shot out at an incredible speed, enveloping both Xiang Yu and Yu Ji within it. Layers upon layers of lotus petals shot out like millions upon millions of blades, thrusting towards both of them at an incredible speed. The blades spun and shone blindingly, as 360 grand white spatial breaching pearls of innate energies soundlessly pierced through the void, vibrating at a very high frequency as they shot towards all the vital parts of Xiang Yu's body. Right at this critical moment, Xiang Yu suddenly stopped all his movements. After that, his body tensed up as he wrapped his arms around Yu Ji's body, shielding her behind his back. Countless lotus petals spun and cut his body at an incredible speed, causing a large amount of blood to splash out. In just a blink of an eye, Xiang Yu's body was riddled with countless wounds. The incredibly sharp silver lotus was not something that his current undying fiend body could withstand. Meanwhile, the 360 grand white spatial breaching pearls of innate energies pierced into his body, bringing up a large amount of blood and opening up countless holes of different sizes on his skin. Xiang Yu roared furiously with extreme pain. Suddenly, he cried out with a stern voice, "Who are you, scoundrel? How dare you sneak attack me? Kill!" Then, he let out a furious roar, followed by a strong killing intent that seemed to have taken a corporeal form. The thread of nascent divinity formed by Wu Qi with the help of the heavenly thunder trembled, and was nearly shattered into pieces by Xiang Yu's loud roar. His 3 spiritual and 7 physical souls were like little saplings in a hurricane, swaying left and right, and nearly ripped to shreds by the roar. Facing this pure killing intent, the 7 holy deities and demons formed by Wu Qi were like a flock of frightened lambs facing a pack of wolves. None of them dared to step forward to resist, and instead, they all retreated to the deepest part of Wu Qi's spiritual ocean. Greatly shocked, Wu Qi casually pulled out 3 magical crossbows made by Qin army, pointed them at Xiang Yu and Yu Ji, and pulled the trigger. But, with a blink of an eye, Yu Ji stood in front of Xiang Yu and shielded him. All the arrows landed on Yu Ji's fair and tender body, creating countless sparks, but not even a single mark was left on her body. Yu Ji waved her hands lightly, and the grand white spatial breaching pearls of innate energy hit her arms. Sparks flew everywhere, but none of them could penetrate her body. With the celestial technique of goddess Xian, unless there was an innate spiritual treasure or a weapon that did not belong to the metal element, it was impossible to damage Yu Ji's body. Although the grand white spatial breaching pearls of innate energy were the embryonic form of an innate spiritual treasure, they were taken out by Wu Qi before they could fully mature. Although they could severely injure Xiang Yu, they could not do anything to Yu Ji now. While Wu Qi was hesitating about what method he should use to give Xiang Yu another fierce blow, a wave of fiend aura came crashing down from above, blotting the sky and blotting the earth. The banner of Qi Yu was waved by the blood-red fiend, smashing down like a huge iron plate. Without hesitation, Wu Qi unleashed the chariot of 8 horses. It transformed into a dazzling 5-colored ray, wrapped around Wu Qi, and dashed out of the cave abode, covering a distance of several tens of thousands of miles in just a blink of an eye. The speed of the chariot of 8 horses was frighteningly fast. Before Yu Ji and Xiang Yu could see what the 5-colored ray looked like, Wu Qi had already disappeared without a trace. On a lone peak several tens of thousands of miles away, Wu Qi suddenly stopped the chariot of 8 horses and revealed himself. With Yu Ji's help, Xiang Yu is no different from a tiger with a pair of wings. Frowning, Wu Qi sighed and said, "His woman tried to seduce me, but he swore to kill me. Now, both of them are working together. Who did I offend?" Chapter 267. The Celestial Technique of Goddess Xian. While muttering the name of this divine ability, Wu Qi rode on a cloud and returned to Meng Fortress in a leisurely manner. When he arrived at Meng Fortress, the sky was already bright, and the sun was shining brightly on the ground. All the mountain ghosts and Yin deities controlled by Chu Ping had hidden themselves deep underground, and finally, the sky above Meng Fortress was covered with a blue sky and white clouds. When Wu Qi walked through the city gate of Meng Fortress, he noticed a few capable captains, who he had never seen before. Their hands were placed on the hilt of their swords, and they were sizing him up from afar. The facial features of these captains were very different from the people of Great Yan Dynasty. Their brows and nose bridge were much taller, and their bodies were taller and taller, but they looked rather skinny, which was similar to Baiqi, Wang Jian, and a few others. Wu Qi recalled that these few captains were the spies planted by Lu Buwei in Qin army, and they were the ones who reported back that everything was normal, leading Yingzheng into the deadly ambush. These captains all had the cultivation base of nascent soul realm, and because of Lu Buwei, it was obvious that they could not be friends with him. Wu Qi smiled sheepishly, cupped his fist and bowed to them from afar. The few captains grinned coldly, gave Wu Qi a deep look, then spun and spoke to a few old men who stood next to them, each clad in a long robe and a tall crown. Wu Qi's pupils constricted to the size of a needle tip. He could clearly recognize these few old men. The one leading them was the ancestral master of Heavenly Spirit sect, Lord Heavenly Spirit, an earth immortal of peak-stage nascent soul realm who had the most profound cultivation base in the Tao of Talisman in Great Yan Dynasty. Wu Qi was truly impressed by Lu Buwei's capability in certain aspects. It seemed that he had just arrived at Meng Fortress for a few days, yet he had already formed a relationship with Lord Heavenly Spirit. Now that two of Wu Qi's most direct and deadly enemies had colluded with each other, Wu Qi would definitely not have an easy time in the future. Compared to Lu Buwei's influence and Lord Heavenly Spirit's strength, Wu Qi was still too weak in all aspects. Frowning, Wu Qi shook his head and headed straight for the mayor's mansion. All of a sudden, a few tall and burly generals suddenly rushed over from an alleyway diagonally. Intentionally or unintentionally, one of them raised his elbow horizontally, thrusting it forcefully towards Wu Qi's right ribs. The general's elbow slashed through the air, creating loud popping noises. Wu Qi's heart skipped a beat. His feet slipped, and he suddenly flew several hundred feet forward. That elbow almost brushed past his ribs. With a muffled sound, the wind from the elbow pierced through the air and smashed the wall to the left of Wu Qi's body into pieces. Smoke and dust filled the air, while the few burly generals laughed and laughed as if nothing had happened. They gave Wu Qi a glance, did not say a word, and simply spun and left along the main street. Wu Qi was taken aback. Suddenly, he recalled the threat Yue gave him during the palace banquet in the Grand Hall that day. As a soldier, he did not care about right or wrong, but only cared about life and death. He could not help but wail in his mind, "Old man Yue, even if you want to cooperate with Yan Dan and put on a show, can you please not make it so real?" Sending a great Yen general to kill someone in the middle of the street, if he did something like this too many times, it would leave a shadow in Wu Qi's heart. As the general was cultivating with the earthly indestructible body from indestructible sect, he had at least the cultivation base of peak stage Jin Dan realm. His skin and muscles were extremely tough. Even if it was an ordinary nascent soul cultivator, his body would suffer some damage when he smashed it with such a powerful blow, let alone Wu Qi, who was merely at the early stage of Jin Dan realm. If an ordinary human immortal at the early stage of Jin Dan realm was hit by such an elbow strike, he would definitely end up with a severe injury that would never be able to stand up again. In a distance, the few Qin generals who had defected to Wu Qi, together with Lord Heavenly Spirit and a few other cultivators, watched the scene of Wu Qi being attacked and killed in the middle of the street with great surprise. They exchanged a glance with each other in surprise. Wu Qi gave them an indignant look, spun and walked out of Meng Fortress. He could no longer stay in Meng Fortress. Instead, it was safer to stay in those mountains guarded by heaven-breaking sword sect. Not long after he turned around and took a few steps, a group of imperial eunuchs rushed out from the main entrance of City Lord Mansion. The leader of the group was none other than Yan Dan's trusted aide, the Prime Minister, the chief commander of Great Yan Dynasty's imperial army, Ma Yi. Upon seeing Wu Qi, Ma Yi cried out hastily, "Duke of Tianyun, where have you been? Quick, quick, His Majesty is looking for you. Somebody, bring Duke of Tianyun in and see His Majesty. I still have to go somewhere else to deliver the imperial decree. You bunch of rascals, why don't you hurry up?" A few imperial eunuchs clad in red clothes rushed over and surrounded Wu Qi, bowing and nodding as they asked him to hurry into the City Lord Mansion and see Yan Dan. Wu Qi was taken aback. He gave Ma Yi a look and made sure that it was impossible for Ma Yi to be involved in the scheme against him. Only then did he feel reassured and followed the few imperial eunuchs into the City Lord Mansion. After passing through a few winding corridors, they finally came to the great hall in the backyard, which was used to discuss official business. Wu Qi saw Yan Dan and Chu Ping sitting high up in the middle of the great hall, while many civil and military officials from Great Yan and Great Chu were standing on their left and right sides, according to their positions. As the chief supervisor of Westfield headquarters of Great Yan, Lu Qingfeng was also standing among the civil officials, tilting his head up and looking at the entrance. After nodding his head slightly at Lu Qingfeng, indicating that he did not make any mistake, Wu Qi strode into the great hall, bowing to Yan Dan and Chu Ping respectively. Chu Ping nodded his head indifferently. A duke of Great Yan dynasty, a man who was like a fish bait, was not worth the attention of the Emperor of Great Chu. Casually, he pulled out a black puppet from under his sleeve, smiled and handed it over to an imperial eunuch standing next to him. "Oh, this is Duke of Tianyun, Wu Qi. Although we failed to kill Yingzheng this time, but Duke of Tianyun has taken the risk of going deep into the enemy's territory to lure the enemy. According to our previous agreement, this ancient celestial fiend statue belongs to Duke of Tianyun. Clad in a green robe, the imperial eunuch carefully held up the puppet and handed it over to Wu Qi. Carefully, Wu Qi took over the puppet. This was the precious treasure that Chu Ping promised to give to Wu Qi. The puppet was extremely heavy, weighing at least 500 kilograms. If not for Wu Qi's solid foundation, and the fact that he had cultivated the dragon transformation script, which gave him a good tempering of his fleshly body, it would be a little strenuous for him to hold this puppet in his hand. The puppet had a very strange shape, a celestial fiend with the head of an ox and the body of a human. It was clad in a heavy armor, holding a large double-edged axe in its hand, and emanating an immense cold air from its body. Chu Ping smiled and said, "By refining it with blood essence, you can fuse a thread of your soul into it, forming an incarnation. If one's cultivation base is sufficient, the strongest version of this celestial fiend statue can be a heaven immortal with the same cultivation base as the real one." This celestial fiend statue is something that Chu Ping found by accident in an ancient cave abode. It is just a small toy, so I'll give it to Duke of Tianyun to protect himself. Apparently, not only Chu Ping, even the other ministers and generals of Great Chu did not take this celestial fiend statue seriously. Firstly, it was possible that Great Chu had quite a number of celestial fiend statues like this. Secondly, Great Chu had countless powerful ghosts and deities, and a mere celestial fiend statue that looked like a clone was not worth their attention at all. Although this treasure was a good treasure, it required a part of one's soul to control it, which would unknowingly weaken the soul power of the real body. For cultivators below the realm of heaven immortal, they would only complain that their cultivation base was not strong enough, fearing that their nascent divinity and soul were not stable enough. So, why would they split their soul to refine an external object like this? To have a myriad of clones and incarnations, this was a trick that only a true heaven immortal would be interested in playing. It was indeed a precious treasure, but it was a precious treasure that was of little value. If Wu Qi possessed the cultivation base of nascent divinity realm, this celestial fiend statue could immediately transform into a nascent divinity clone, which would increase his overall strength by more than one-fold. However, if an early-stage Jin Dan cultivator was asked to refine this celestial fiend statue, even if he had several dozens of celestial fiend statues, or several dozens of Jin Dan cultivators, what would be the use? An earth immortal of nascent soul realm could still kill him with just one palm strike. Furthermore, in order to refine this celestial fiend statue, the blood essence and soul consumed would be more than enough to delay the progress of a Jin Dan cultivator's cultivation base by a few times. However, Wu Qi did not see it the same way. It was easy for him to obtain blood essence and soul, so he did not take them seriously. The celestial fiend statue looked ancient and heavy, and it contained a strange gleam. It should be a pretty good treasure. Furthermore, a treasure that could allow one's soul to transform into a clone was of great value to Wu Qi. In the future, he would no longer need to worry about being unable to split himself into two. Together with the various strange mystic techniques he learned from Scroll of Stealing, it would be much easier for him to move around. Holding the celestial fiend statue tightly with both hands, Wu Qi thanked Chu Ping without hesitation. This treasure did suit his taste. As the celestial fiend statue did suit Wu Qi's taste, when Wu Qi thanked Chu Ping, his expression was very sincere. On the contrary, Chu Ping felt a little embarrassed because of Wu Qi. He gave Wu Qi a look, then turned to look at Yan Dan. Suddenly, he burst into a loud laughter and said, forget it, Chu Ping is too stingy." He reached his hand into his sleeve and fumbled for a while, then pulled out another 17 tiny celestial fiend statues that looked exactly the same, and gave them to the servant standing next to him. He threw his head back and laughed. Chu Ping has been holding these ancient celestial fiend statues in his hand for a very long time, but I still have no idea how he made them. I'll give all of them to Duke of Tianyun. Chu Ping can only focus on his cultivation, and I'm too lazy to touch these mere worldly possessions. 17 heavy celestial fiend statues fell into Wu Qi's hand, which happened to form 18 different weapons, including blades, spears, swords, halberds, axes, whips, and spears. Wu Qi was struck with great joy. Without hesitation, he thanked Chu Ping solemnly once again, then shoved all 18 tiny fiend puppets into the black dragon's spirit ring. After a brief moment of pondering, Wu Qi was about to report to Yan Dan about the cultivation techniques he obtained from Zhang Yi, but the fat Lu Buwei had already swaggered into the hall from the outside, nodding his head at Yan Dan and Chu Ping in a carefree manner. Yan Dan rose to his feet hastily, smiled at Lu Buwei and said, "Teacher is here? What can I do for you?" Lu Buwei gave Wu Qi a cold gaze, then said coolly, "The teleportation formations leading to the other dynasties have been constructed. The emissary of Great Wei is waiting outside. Great Wei is now at war with Great Zhao. In my opinion, no matter how many benefits we can get from Great Wei, we must not let them go." Wu Qi shut his mouth and retreated to the row of Great Yan's civil and military officials. He gave Lu Buwei a deep look. Relying on the heavenly ghost grand magic cultivated by him, this old fellow had traveled all over the world and established Wei merchant in all the dynasties. Now, with his power, he had quickly constructed the teleportation formations leading to the other dynasties. Surprisingly, the emissary of Great Wei had arrived at this delicate juncture. Chu Ping laughed, then asked softly, "May I know who is the emissary of Great Wei?" Lu Buwei cleared his throat and said with a dry voice, "He can be considered as an old acquaintance of ours. Duke Long Yang is now the governor of Great Wei's imperial politics." Wu Qi's ankle twisted, and he nearly fell to the ground. Chapter 268. A series of light footsteps rang out, as Wu Qi blended into the crowd and peered curiously at the door. A faintly discernible aroma wafted into the room, as a clump of clouds suddenly emerged in front of the door. A young man, standing about 7 feet tall, clad in a set of lotus-white robe that looked like a long robe or a palace skirt, and draped over his shoulders with a large coat woven from long green feathers, walked slowly into the room. Wu Qi could not find any words to describe his appearance. He was a young man who stood about 7 feet tall, clad in a set of lotus-white robe that looked like a palace skirt or a long robe. Wu Qi could not tell if it was a long robe or a palace skirt. The man was like a gentle jade sculpture. Every move he made was fair and gentle, in accordance with the laws and logos. Even his hair and the pink rouge between his eyebrows were so natural that there was not the slightest bit of disharmony or glaring to the eye. He walked slowly into the hall, bowed slightly to Yan Dan and Chu Ping, and said, "Long Yang offers greetings, your majesties." He turned his eyes to Yan Dan, smiled and said, "It has been a long time. Your Highness, the Crown Prince, is now your majesty." Clang! A few palace maids standing behind Yan Dan accidentally broke the jade plates, bowls, and other utensils they were holding in their hands. Immediately, these palace maids, whose faces turned pale with fright, were dragged to the back of the hall by a few imperial eunuchs, who had a strange look in their eyes. Almost at the same time, all the civil and military officials in the hall swallowed a mouthful of saliva at the same time. Apart from Wu Qi and a few others who could maintain a clear mind, when the rest of them saw Duke of Long Yang, they all experienced a hair-raising transformation. This Duke of Long Yang was clad in an attire that looked like that of a man or a woman, yet neither was. Nevertheless, with his visage, his stature, and his demeanor, one could easily regard him as a peerlessly handsome man, or a peerlessly enchanting woman. In short, if one thought he was a man, he would be a handsome man like Panan and Song Yu. If one thought he was a woman, he would be a beautiful woman who was even more alluring than Yu Ji and Yu Tan. Lao Ai, who was mingled in the crowd of Great Yan's civil and military officials, had his eyes fixed on Duke of Long Yang. Suddenly, a sound of silk ripping was heard coming from his lower garment. Lao Ai gave a muffled snort, hastily bent down and coughed a few times. Without any excuse, he spun and transformed into a gust of wind and sped away. On the side of Great Chu, a few military officials who were brimming with energy and blood also bent down awkwardly. Of course of panic, they did not dare to look at Duke of Long Yang again. They knew Duke of Long Yang was a man, but a man who looked more feminine than of a woman, was a demon who was even scarier than Lao of Yang. Lao of Lao Ai, they knew that he was of a man. Of him of a. But Lord Longyang was able to make men with unstable minds gradually fall in love with him. Gradually of love. Into their hearts. It. Of Qian. In. Of Lu Cheng of and. Of Lu. Like he had he. With of. Cautiously, he transmitted his voice to Wu Qi. Why does this Duke of Longyang look like this? Why does he attract more attention than those girls? Wu Qi laughed dryly. He dared not to look at Duke of Longyang for too long. This was indeed a man who was more evildoer than Lao Ai, with a more lethal force. Although Wu Qi's spiritual ocean was guarded by the 7 holy deities and devils, when he laid eyes on Duke of Longyang for the first time, his mind was slightly shaken. With great effort, he managed to stabilize his soul with the power of divine flame of order, and maintain a trace of clarity in his divine will. This was a peerless demon who could kill both men and women, a demon who was even more evildoer than Lao Ai. He looked as gentle as jade, as if he did not pose any threat. However, Wu Qi's instinct told him that this was a pearl condensed from arsenic, 10,000 times more poisonous than any poison under the heaven. Yen Dan cleared his throat, breaking the weird atmosphere in the grand hall. He laughed dryly and said, Duke of Longyang, you must have worked hard to come here from afar. Have a seat, have a seat. I need to prepare a seat for all my ministers and dukes. It is not right to stand like this, not right at all. Looking at those civil and military officials, who were bending down in a sorry state and dared not to straighten their backs, Yen Dan felt that it was better for everyone to sit on their knees. The eunuchs and servants quickly brought over many tables and placed them properly. One after another, everyone took their seats and sat on their knees on the soft seats. When everyone was seated, only then did Duke of Longyang, in a graceful and charming manner that would make all the beauties in the world jealous, slowly picked up a cup of tea served to him by 2 palace maids, whose faces were blushing. Gently, he pouted his red lips and took a sip of the fragrant tea, which was specially provided by Great Yen Dynasty. After taking a sip, Duke of Longyang put down the cup, smiled and said, Good tea, fragrant and fragrant, a rare good tea. Then, he swung his hands and dragged the long sleeves of his robe to his side. He tilted his head up, smiled at Yen Dan and said, It is not hard at all. Prime Minister Liu had constructed a teleportation formation, and it only took me a few steps to come here from Great Wei's Imperial Palace. How is it hard at all? Once again, Duke of Longyang's flirtatious gesture made all the people in the grand hall fall into a trance. This time, even Wu Qi nearly failed to resist Duke of Longyang's gesture. He pinched his own thigh and used the severe pain to wake himself up. Meanwhile, Lu Qingfeng, who stood right next to him, took out a small awl, stabbed it into his thigh and gave it a hard stir. Only then did he manage to keep his mind clear. On the other hand, over 70% of the civilian and military officials in the Grand Hall had their eyes fixed on Duke of Longyang, greedily looking as if they wished they could swallow him with a single gulp of water. Fortunately, he was an emissary from Great Wei Dynasty. If it were an ordinary man, perhaps he would have long been abducted back to some mansion, and in Great Yen or Great Chu, the wives and concubines of some high officials and nobles would be bitterly disappointed when they found out that their husbands no longer had any interest in them. Yen Dan swallowed a mouthful of saliva, laughed dryly and said, That's great. I wonder what is the purpose of Duke of Longyang's visit to Great Yen and Great Chu? Duke of Longyang nodded his head lightly and said, I've learned from Prime Minister Liu that Great Yen and Great Chu had plotted against Zheng and nearly killed him. I believe everyone knows very well what kind of people we are, so there's no need for us to play those old tricks. Let me make a long story short. Great Yen, Great Chu, and Great Wei will join hands and annihilate Great Zhao first to deter Great Qi. After that, we will join hands and conquer Xianyang City, killing all the clan members of Emperor Qin. What do you think? Duke of Longyang pulled out a scroll from under his sleeve and said in a deep voice, "Our Majesty has authorized Longyang that Great Wei, Great Yen, and Great Chu can be sworn brothers forever, and we can pray to the heaven and earth that the three dynasties will never fight against each other again. However, Daqin is destined to be wiped out. As for this Great Zhao, it is currently at war with Great Wei. We can just wipe it out along the way." Before Yan Dan and Chu Ping could say anything, Duke of Longyang continued, "Both your majesties are wise emperors. You should know that the world is a vast place, and we can totally share it. There's no need for us to fight to the death. The three dynasties are mortal enemies with Daqin. As long as this mortal enemy is wiped out, we can live together in peace." Yan Dan knitted his brows and pondered, while Chu Ping smiled indifferently and said, "What Duke of Longyang said makes perfect sense. We can agree to join forces and attack Daqin. But, why did Great Wei want to wage war against Great Zhao? I hope Duke can give us an answer to this question." Wu Qi raised his brows, as his interest was immediately piqued. According to what he knew, all the dynasties had only started to have some contact with each other recently. No matter from what perspective, Great Wei and Great Zhao should not fight each other so badly right after they met. There must be some unknown reason behind this. Duke of Longyang smiled faintly. He gave Yan Dan and Chu Ping a glance, chuckled and said, "Sure enough, I can't hide it from both your majesties." He clapped his palm lightly, and immediately, numerous white lotuses flew out from the edge of his palm, bringing with them a faint aroma as they wheeled around him, Yan Dan, and Chu Ping. These white lotuses were glinting with a faint spirit light, which was righteous but not evil. The faint aroma lingering in the air was even more refreshing, cleansing one's mind and mind. A hazy white mist swirled around Duke of Longyang, Yan Dan, and Chu Ping, preventing them from seeing their mouths and hearing their words. Soundlessly, Wu Qi exercised the mystic eyes of universe. His eyes shone with a bright gleam, and in an instant, he saw through the white mist unleashed by Duke of Longyang. Through the art of lip reading, Wu Qi saw Duke of Longyang smiling at Yan Dan and Chu Ping and saying, "It is not a big deal. It is just that the exploration teams from both dynasties had discovered an immortal ruin that occupied a vast land in the depth of He Mountain, and had gained some benefits from it. The exploration teams from both dynasties had fought each other for the treasures, and both had lost some men." Yan Dan's answer was, "Just some men lost, and yet both dynasties are willing to fight each other." Duke of Longyang shrugged his shoulders and shook his head lightly, looking extremely elegant and graceful. For a moment, both Yan Dan and Chu Ping were slightly taken aback. Duke of Longyang continued, "However, among those who were lost, there are 3 princes from Great Wei, and 4 princes and 7 grandsons from Great Zhao." Smiling faintly, Duke of Longyang said indifferently, "As the ruin is located rather close to Great Wei, the reinforcement from Great Wei arrived at a faster speed, and killed more men." Wu Qi narrowed his eyes. So, this was the reason. The standard of the 2 exploration teams was extremely high, and both teams were led by princes. Therefore, the death of one team would mean the loss of a few princes. Most probably, those who were lost were the core princes with real power and status. Otherwise, why would the 2 dynasties go to war just for them? Chu Ping smiled and said, "Since it is an immortal ruin, and since it is an alliance of 3 dynasties." Chu Ping and Yan Dan exchanged a glance and smiled. Duke of Longyang's pale lips curved into a thin line as he said, "Great Wei will take 60% of the loot. This is the bottom line." When Yan Dan and Chu Ping heard that it was an immortal ruin, and it occupied a vast area, how could they possibly give away so much of the great loot? Immediately, both of them joined hands to put pressure on Duke of Longyang, demanding more benefits. In just the time it took to finish a pot of tea, under the tremendous pressure from Great Yen and Great Chu, Duke of Longyang had no choice but to retreat inch by inch. In the end, Duke of Longyang suddenly sighed and said, "Fine, Great Wei will take 40% of the loot, while Great Yen and Great Chu will each take 30%. But, there is another condition. The alliance of the 3 countries must first attack Great Zhao. Great Wei must occupy at least 70% of Great Zhao's territory. Otherwise, Great Wei would rather share the ruins with Great Zhao than let others take advantage of it. Apart from that, there is also a small personal grudge. Yan Dan and Chu Ping exchanged a glance, then Chu Ping smiled and said, "What kind of personal grudge?" "Duke of Longyang, which one of them has a grudge against Great Chu or Great Yan?" Duke of Longyang smiled faintly. Suddenly, he dispersed the white mist and white lotus, rose to his feet, pointed his finger at Wu Qi and cried out, "Little Wu Qi, do you dare to fight a life-and-death duel with my swordsman? You are a good boy, so don't act like a little girl. If you can kill my swordsman, I'll never trouble you again in the future." Wu Qi was struck dumb, while Yan Dan and Chu Ping were taken aback. Wu Qi pointed his finger at his own nose and asked, "Me? What?" "My lord, I think you have mistaken me for someone else." Duke of Longyang gave him a charming smile, shook his head and said, "It is you, Wu Qi. Someone has offered me a sky-high price, begging me to kill you." Almost instinctively, Wu Qi turned to look at Lu Buwei, who sat at the head of all Great Yan's ministers. Chapter 269. The entire hall fell into a dead silence. No one could have predicted that Duke of Longyang, as the emissary of Great Wei, would actually bring up such an additional clause when he was discussing the conditions of the alliance with Yan Dan and Chu Ping. Did he have a personal grudge against Wu Qi? Everyone knew that was just an excuse. As for the person who had a personal grudge against Wu Qi, it could not be Duke of Longyang. It could only be someone in the hall who had a friendly relationship with Duke of Longyang. Everyone turned to look at Lu Buwei at the same time. With a calm expression on his face, Lu Buwei held a teacup in his hand, slowly swaying his head and tasting the tea. He did not look unnatural or uneasy at all. Yan Dan's expression immediately turned extremely unsightly. He looked at Lu Buwei, then turned to look at Wu Qi, and did not say a word for a long while. Wu Qi breathed out a long sigh in his mind. Lu Buwei, Heavenly Spirit Sect, together with Yu Yi and Qin Wuyang, who were both half real and half fake. There was no way he could stay in Ji City any longer. In fact, he could not even stay beside Lu Qingfeng, or else, Lu Qingfeng would be implicated by him. Even though Lu Qingfeng now had some foundation in Great Yan Dynasty's imperial court, compared to Lu Buwei, Heavenly Spirit Sect, Yu Yi, and Qin Wuyang, even if Yu Yi and Qin Wuyang were just putting on a show, when they joined forces, they would still bring disaster to Lu Qingfeng. He rose to his feet and gave Duke of Longyang a sidelong glance. Suddenly, Wu Qi felt a sense of disgust in his heart. "All of you are old men who are over 2,000 to 3,000 years old. Why are you bothering with a nobody like me?" A flame of anger surged up from his heart. With a cold voice, Wu Qi said, "You are an old demon who is over several thousand years old, yet you still dress like a popular girl in a brothel. Could it be that you are addicted to selling your buttocks?" Crack! The teacup in Lu Buwei's hand shattered into pieces, and all the tea in it evaporated into steam. He looked at Wu Qi in horror, then looked at Duke of Longyang, whose face had turned pale, as if he couldn't understand why Wu Qi would say such words. Those words were so vicious that they completely destroyed Lu Buwei's understanding of politics and etiquette. They completely subverted Lu Buwei's worldview and outlook on life. How could such a vile and ignorant person appear in a place where the upper echelons of the three countries were gathered? How could there be such vicious, senseless, and even vulgar words? Even if Lord Longyang was indeed like what Wu Qi had said, but these words could not be said in such a way. To be able to spend a night with Lord Longyang was such an elegant and wonderful thing. Why did it become so different in Wu Qi's mouth? With a gloomy face, Wu Qi no longer looked at Duke of Longyang, who had turned pale, and walked straight up to Yan Dan and bowed. "Your Majesty, I, Wu Qi, have a request." Wu Qi said coldly. "Later, after I kill all the disciples of Duke of Longyang, Wu Qi, please go to the shore of the Great Eastern Ocean and build a kingdom. I will use the fiefdom under Wu Qi's name to exchange for the support of Great Yan Dynasty in building my kingdom." With Lu Buwei and his men staying in Ji City, Wu Qi's future situation would become more and more awkward. On top of that, there was also Yu Qianqian in Ji City, who was obsessed with Wu Qi's masculinity. No matter how one looked at it, Ji City had become a land of troubles. Instead of being constantly attacked there, it would be better for him to take the initiative and leave the land of Great Yan Dynasty. He would go to another place and build a foundation that belonged to Wu Qi alone. To the west, there was the Yuanyang Kingdom, Meng Fortress, and Little Meng City. In the future, if Wu Qi could build a new vassal kingdom in the east, together with Yi Zishuan's Purple Leaf City and the power of heaven-breaking sword sect behind Yi Zishuan. With the combined strength of these few parties, Wu Qi would have the power to protect himself. In Ji City, if one wanted to raise a private army, he would have to borrow the name of the number 1 martial club under the heaven. But, in his own land, it was natural to raise as many private soldiers as he wanted. As long as Wu Qi could afford it, he would have the money to raise a private army. As for the source of income, although the shore of the Great Eastern Ocean was dangerous, there was the Long Bow Kingdom and the Kingdom of Feathermen there. The warriors of the Long Bow Kingdom could be captured and tamed, then added to the Heavenly Hundred Spirit Warring Formation. The slaves of the Feathermen Kingdom were very popular when sold to Great Yan Dynasty. The Great Eastern Ocean also produced all kinds of precious pearls, as well as all kinds of strange and rare materials. Wu Qi planned to let Hai Yuntian build his own private chamber of commerce in the Market of Four Seas, which specialized in selling all kinds of precious treasures produced by the Great Eastern Ocean. Wu Qi also had a complete set of plans in his mind. He was almost confident that he could completely monopolize all kinds of products from the Great Eastern Ocean. What a monopoly could bring was a high profit. What a high profit could bring was an endless amount of money. With money, he would be able to raise an army, and with enough soldiers, he would be able to find cultivators with sufficient latent potential and slowly grow his own strength. He had to leave Ji City as soon as possible. If he stayed in Ji City, he could only be beaten passively. Although it seemed risky to leave Ji City, with the endless trump cards he had, as long as he was not attacked by 2 or more nascent divinity cultivators, he would not be afraid of anyone, as long as he was not attacked by 2 or more nascent divinity cultivators. Therefore, Wu Qi bowed deeply to Yan Dan and said, Wu Qi, am willing to request for the support of the imperial court by using my fief and city in exchange for the support of the imperial court. I, Wu Qi, will bring a group of people to the shore of the Great Eastern Ocean, and choose a place to build a city and establish a kingdom, expanding the territory of Great Yan Dynasty. From the corner of his eyes, Yan Dan glanced over at Lu Buwei, who was sitting straight and motionless. He had already made up his mind. With a deep voice, he said, approved. As long as you can defeat the disciples of Duke of Longyang, you will immediately pack up your things and go to the Great Eastern Ocean. Your fief in Great Yan Dynasty will still be yours. I will give you a generous allowance, and help you build your city smoothly. Because of your contribution this time, I have promised to confer you the title of Duke of Great Yan Dynasty with purple jade ribbon. This is the highest title of Duke in Great Yan Dynasty. Wu Qi sighed lightly. Looking at Yan Dan's expression, between himself and Lu Buwei, Wu Qi had completely sided with Lu Buwei. However, Wu Qi felt that if he were Yan Dan, he would also make the same choice. The resources in Lu Buwei's hands were much more than Wu Qi's, and the help he could provide to Great Yan was much greater. At least, with the power of Wei Merchant, Great Yan had planted countless spies in all the kingdoms, while the infiltration of other kingdoms into Great Yan was still like a piece of blank paper. The strategic power that Lu Buwei represented was too strong, and what could he, Wu Qi, have? Fortunately, I have never shown any loyalty to Great Yan, to Yan Dan. Wu Qi was laughing in his mind. Fortunately, he never had a good impression of Yan Dan and Great Yan. He was only curious about Jing Ku, and he was the only one who had a good impression of him. Once again, Wu Qi bowed to Yan Dan, then said in a deep voice, if that's the case, I'll be so bold as to ask your majesty to support Wu Qi with 200,000 mighty soldiers and 50 million people, to help Wu Qi build his city on the shore of the Great Eastern Ocean. As for the 200,000 mighty soldiers, I'll choose them myself, and all their family members will be brought there by me. All of them will have to swear their loyalty to me. As for the 50 million people, I'll let you choose them from all the vassal kingdoms under the heaven. As for the provisions, materials, all kinds of armaments, magical items, talismans, etc., I hope your majesty can give me a generous subsidy. Best if it can support the needs of my city's development for 100 years. All the ministers of Great Chu did not say a word. This was Great Yan's business. Meanwhile, all the civil and military officials of Great Yan cried out in surprise. Suddenly, Lu Bue burst into a loud laughter and said, "Duke of Tianyun, what you said is absurd. I've studied the history of Great Yan's imperial court, and I know that any minister who leads his people to build a new city in a faraway place has at most 1 million people under his command, and he doesn't have any soldiers accompanying him. At most, he only has several thousand personal guards sent by his clan. What makes Duke of Tianyun so bold to make such a request?" Slamming the table in front of him, Lu Bue cried out in a deep voice, "Just because of a single word from Duke of Tianyun, 50 million innocent people have abandoned their homes and gone to the shore of the Great Eastern Ocean, a desolate and dangerous place to struggle for survival. Duke of Tianyun, do you know that the heaven has the virtue of cherishing every living thing? Don't you think your reckless action is going against the heaven's law and human relations? Duke of Tianyun, you have made 50 million innocent people risk their lives and follow Duke of Tianyun to build a new city. Duke of Tianyun, you have a very cruel heart." Wu Qi gave Lu Bue a cold glance and said, "These 50 million people are just the first batch of people. In the future, I will ask your majesty to provide more assistance to Wu Qi. Perhaps, Wu Qi is going to transfer over 100 million people from other vassal kingdoms and make them belong to Wu Qi's newly built city." Wu Qi's words shocked everyone in the hall. It was not rare for Great Yan to build a new city and open up a new territory. Many exiled sons of noble clans would bring their own people and guards to open up their own base of operations. But, just as Lu Bue said, even the sons of concubines from those great clans could only bring a maximum of 1 million people to build a new city. On the other hand, for those unlucky sons of concubines from small clans, some of them would even bring a few thousand people and leave their clans to build their own territory in the future. But here, Wu Qi had asked for 50 million people for the first batch of people, and also asked Great Yan to dispatch 200,000 mighty soldiers to follow his orders. This was simply an exorbitant demand, treating Yan Dan as a sucker. 50 million people and 200,000 mighty soldiers, and this was just the first batch of manpower. How many more reinforcements would he need in the future? There were also all kinds of supplies, such as provisions, money, and many other things. The cost of 100 years of development was an astronomical figure. Great Yan dynasty could afford this amount of manpower and resources, but why would they give it to Wu Qi? Under the watchful eyes of all the people, Wu Qi fished out one scripture after another from Zhang Yi's storage ring, each glinting with blinding runes. There was a total of over 400 different scriptures, piled up before Wu Qi by Qiqi. With a deep voice, Wu Qi said, "I was lucky. Wanying Dragon King had severely wounded Zhang Yi, an important minister of Daqin. From him, I snatched this storage ring, which contains the cultivation techniques practiced by many of Daqin's captains and mighty clans." Almost at the same time, Yan Dan and Chu Ping leaped to their feet, while Duke of Long Yang's face turned pale, giving Lu Bue a resentful look. "Sure enough," Wu Qi said, "with these scriptures, I think they can make His Majesty agree to my request. With them, even if we can't completely restrain the divine abilities and mystic techniques practiced by many of Daqin's mighty generals, we can at least learn them beforehand. Perhaps." With a wave of his hand, Yan Dan kept all the scriptures into his sleeve. With a deep voice, he cried out, "Approved. Wu Qi is opening the Great Eastern Ocean, and whoever dares to stop him, I will not let them off easily. No matter what my dear Wu Qi needs, you can just look for Imperial Grandmaster Yu Xian." Wu Qi laughed. Looking for Imperial Grandmaster Yu Xian to handle this? This was tantamount to opening a big hole in the national treasury of Great Yan dynasty. With a pleasant smile on his face, Wu Qi rose to his feet and looked at Duke of Longyang with a cold face. "Miss Emissary, where are your swordsmen?" Once again, everyone's face fell. Chapter 270. A loud boom rang out. The beautiful sword cultivator sent by Duke of Longyang, a peak-tier sword cultivator from Jindan, was instantly killed by Wu Qi using the combination of acquired earth pearls and 108 powerful thunder talismans. It was a real instant kill, as the enchanting sword cultivator did not even have the chance to struggle. Before Wu Qi could figure out whether the beautiful sword cultivator was a man or a woman, the man had vanished into nothingness amidst the blinding light. Yen Dan and the others were not surprised by the result. During the battle in the drill ground of the Imperial Palace, Wu Qi had shown his overall strength, which was enough to kill a peak-tier human immortal from Jindan. If the acquired earth pearls were used properly, they could even threaten the life of an earth immortal of nascent soul realm. But, the combination of 108 powerful thunder talismans had completely wiped out the possibility of the beautiful sword cultivator escaping, not even leaving a trace of his broken soul behind. Obviously, Lu Bue was taken aback. As the power of Wei merchant in Ji City was completely uprooted, he did not get the latest information related to Wu Qi. Duke of Longyang's expression remained unchanged, and no one could tell what he was thinking about the death of his accompanying sword cultivator. He was still discussing the alliance between the three dynasties with Yen Dan and Chu Ping with a smile on his face, but from time to time, he would throw a flirtatious glance at Lu Bue. In the face of Lord Longyang's words and actions, Lu Bue could only droop his head, like a dying old man with one foot in the grave. He did not have the slightest bit of energy, and no one knew what he was thinking. But, all these had nothing to do with Wu Qi. After being promoted as the Duke of Purple Jade Seal, Wu Qi had become a first-grade Duke of Great Yen, and his status could be considered as one of the nobles. On top of that, the chief supervisor of Westfield headquarters was Lu Qingfeng. Therefore, it only took Wu Qi a very short amount of time to hand over all the official duties in his hands. In the great hall in front of them, the discussion on the detailed terms of the alliance between the three dynasties was in full swing. Every single condition was discussed carefully. Yen Dan and Chu Ping, together with the most astute ministers of both dynasties, were fighting inch by inch for all kinds of benefits with Duke of Longyang. In the office hall at the side of the hall, Lu Qingfeng was holding a large seal and solemnly stamping a crimson seal on the official document signed by Wu Qi. After he stamped the seal, Wu Qi had officially severed all ties with the Westfield headquarters of Great Yen Dynasty. He was no longer an advisor of the Westfield headquarters, but a free and unrestrained Duke of Great Yen Dynasty. Lu Qingfeng grabbed the document and blew at the red seal. After that, he rolled up the document and handed it over to Lu Ziyuan, who stood beside him. Clasping his hands behind his back, he stared at Wu Qi and sighed under his breath. "Lu Bue, Heavenly Spirit Sect, and Yu Qianqian. I made a note of them. When I have the chance, I will try to give them some trouble. Especially." Wu Qi looked at Lu Qingfeng, who looked very serious. He could not help but laugh and said, "Especially Yu Qianqian. Send someone to keep a close watch on them, don't let go of any clues. But, do not approach them recklessly. I suspect that Yu Qianqian is the one who wounded Weining Dragon King with a talisman, allowing Zhang Yi and his men to escape, allowing him to send someone to deliver the message to Qin army." He recalled the scene when she killed Yu Wendi with a crossbow on that snowy night. Yu Qianqian had also used a powerful golden talisman, using it to block off the bolts that could have killed her and Yu Wendi. Not only did the talisman possess an amazing defensive strength, it also possessed a very strong counterattack. Apparently, it was an immortal talisman personally crafted by an existence of heaven immortal realm. The talisman that wounded Weining Dragon King, his father, and all those great demons was also an immortal talisman of the same grade. Lowering his voice, he quickly told Lu Qingfeng about his suspicions. Lu Qingfeng kept nodding his head, keeping Wu Qi's words in his mind. According to what Wu Qi said, Yu Qianqian and her father, and even the entire Yu clan, were really harboring evil intentions, and no one knew what they were planning to do. The person who released the immortal talisman had leaked the ambush formation map of the allied army of Great Yen and Great Chu to Qin army. However, in the end, Hu Hai had used a crazy method to force Yen Dan to release the captives. If Hu Hai did not come out, and Qin army attacked the weak point of the ambush formation based on the formation map, perhaps all the ordinary soldiers of Qin army would be killed or severely wounded, but Yingzheng would still have the chance to escape. I never thought that there would be such a varmint in Great Yen dynasty. Lu Qingfeng breathed out a deep sigh. Wu Qi patted on Lu Qingfeng's shoulder, smiled and said, "I'll leave this to you. After all, the world belongs to Great Yen, and you are a member of Great Yen imperial clan. No matter what happens to Great Yen, you won't be able to run away." Squeezing Lu Qingfeng's shoulder, Wu Qi said in a deep voice, "Many dynasties are at war, and the world is going to be plunged into chaos. With our cultivation base and overall strength, we can only struggle to survive. The reason why I'm going to Great Eastern Ocean to build a new city is not only to avoid Lu Buwei and his men, but also to leave us a way out." With a strange smile on his face, Wu Qi murmured in a low voice, "Even if Great Yen is defeated, it will still take us a few years to travel from the westernmost to the easternmost, right? With this time as a buffer, do you think we can escape to anywhere? This is a vast world, and if we really can't make it, we can always flee to Dragon Count Kingdom, Featherman Kingdom, or some other place. The world is vast, and we can find shelter anywhere." Lu Qingfeng glared at him and said angrily, "Why are you thinking of escaping when the war is not over? Judging from the current situation, the allied army of Great Yen and Great Chu has gained the upper hand, and Qin army has suffered a few losses." After lecturing Wu Qi, Lu Qingfeng suddenly put on an awkward smile and said in a low voice, "If we really can't hold on any longer, it's not too late for us to escape. Here, we have so many benefits, and we can't just throw them away. Little Meng City, Meng Fortress, they are the foundation that we started our business from." Wu Qi and Lu Qingfeng exchanged a glance, then stretched out both hands at the same time and held each other's palm. Both men shook hands, then Wu Qi pulled back his hand, spun, and left the hall. Lu Qingfeng looked at Wu Qi's back, then flipped his palm and revealed a storage ring. It was the storage ring given to him by Wu Qi. It contained a large amount of energy stones, demon cores, and other items that Wu Qi looted from Zhang Yi, and 3 barrels of dragon blood essence, which were more than enough for Lu Qingfeng to cultivate all the way to nascent soul realm without worrying about the lack of supporting treasures. Wearing the storage ring on his finger, Lu Qingfeng said in a deep voice, "The Great Eastern Ocean is a very dangerous place. Wu Qi, be careful on your journey." Wu Qi turned his head and waved his hand, then walked out of the hall while laughing happily. Lu Qingfeng didn't send him out, and he didn't ask Lu Qingfeng to do so either. At this moment, Wu Qi's heart was filled with lofty sentiments and passion. After jumping out of the muddy water that was Ji City, he now had the qualification to seek for greater power and greater benefits. However, right after he walked out of the hall, a fragrant breeze came blowing at him from the side. The aggressive Princess Zhanglu had leaped over, grabbed Wu Qi's ear and gave it a tight twist. Princess Zhanglu scolded him with a low voice, "You've grown up, haven't you? Not only did you quit the good job of the Deputy Chief Supervisor of Westfield Headquarters, but you want to go to the shore of the Great Eastern Ocean to open up a new city? You even extorted a huge sum of money from Grandpa. You've really grown up." Gnashing her teeth and twisting Wu Qi's ear for a long while, Princess Zhanglu finally growled in a low voice, "Why did you go so far? Why did you go so far to the Great Eastern Ocean? When you're not in Ji City, who will accompany me? Who will talk to me? You've kissed me in front of so many people, and now you're going to a place so far away. What's the meaning of this?" After struggling to free himself from Princess Zhang Li's grip, Wu Qi bent his waist and took a few steps forward in a sorry manner. He turned his head and looked at Princess Zhanglu in surprise, then cried out in a low voice, "Why don't you come with me? I'll open up a new city, and you'll be the Deputy City Lord, or the Chief Supervisor, or the City Lord's wife. You can do whatever you want. Isn't it better if you and I join hands and build our own kingdom?" Princess Xianglu was taken aback, and her pretty face suddenly blushed. She stomped her feet fiercely, then the angry Princess Xianglu put on a sweet smile, rolled her eyes, tilted her chin up and said, Who wants to be your city lord's wife? Unless you can build the strongest vassal kingdom in Great Yan Dynasty, I'll never marry you. Twisting her little finger, Princess Xianglu tilted her head and said, The man who wants to marry me must be the man with the most power in Great Yan Dynasty, besides my grandfather and father. He must be the strongest man, besides my grandfather and father. It would be best if he has the cultivation base of heaven immortal. And, he must use the most luxurious chariot under the heaven, riding a rainbow cloud to marry me amidst the cheers of countless people. Rolling her eyes, Princess Xianglu continued, For my wedding, the guards of honor will have to be at least 1 million people, right? And, the dowry will have to be at least 100,000 maids and maids. All of them must be beauties with unrivaled beauty, or else, wouldn't that be a great disgrace to me? What about all the utensils? If I say all the utensils, including the combs, shoes, and socks, are upper-grade magical treasures, won't that be too extravagant? Taking a deep breath, Princess Xianglu narrowed her eyes, smiled and said, Of course, for the wedding chariot, the strength of the beast driving the chariot must not be too weak. If I can use 9 real heaven dragons to pull the chariot, I'll be perfectly satisfied. Looking at Princess Xianglu, who seemed to be lost in her own thoughts, Wu Qi could not help but shake his head. If he allowed her to continue thinking, perhaps she would say that the master of ceremonies for her wedding must be a divine gold immortal as well. 9 real heaven dragons pulling the chariot. Not to mention the real heaven dragons, even the old dragon king of Longyuan River would pull the chariot for you. He would definitely raise a great flood and attack Ji City, and he would never say anything to you. Putting his arms around Princess Xiangli's waist, Wu Qi breathed out a long sigh and said, You will have it, everything will be there. We will have bread, we will have milk, and we will have the wedding chariot pulled by heaven dragons. As long as both of us join hands and work hard to develop our own city, our own kingdom, everything will be there. Amidst Wu Qi's deceptive words, Princess Xianglu had a silly smile on her face. Along the way, she was thinking about the various items she would need for her wedding, then followed Wu Qi and stepped into the teleportation formation that led to Ji City. Lu Qingfeng stood in front of the hall, looking at the back of Wu Qi and Princess Xianglu with a smile on his face. Brother, have a safe journey. I'll be in Ji City, and I won't let them disturb you. Lu Qingfeng smiled, but a cold gleam shone in his eyes. When Wu Qi left him for real, Lu Qingfeng felt like he had returned to the time when he was still a teenager, all alone, struggling to survive in the mansion of Lu clan in Liang. An unprecedented fighting spirit was burning fiercely in Lu Qingfeng's heart. Wu Qi had left Meng Mountains, where the war was raging, and this huge whirlpool of troubles. Along the way, he brought Princess Xianglu with him, and both of them went to the Great Eastern Ocean, building their own city and kingdom. Chapter 271. In the northeastern region of Great Yan Dynasty, in a remote corner in the northernmost area, a coastal plain that didn't even have a name, Purple Leaf City was located right here. Under the leadership of Yizidu, the millions of people of Purple Leaf City were like the most tenacious moss, quietly taking root and sprouting in this place, reproducing their offspring, accumulating their strength bit by bit, gradually accumulating the capital of Purple Leaf City. In those years, as the bastard son of Yi clan of Tianfang Kingdom, Yizidu had offended countless elders and young talents of his clan, and that was the reason why he was sent to this damned place to build a city. The area where Purple Leaf City was built was personally designated by some elders of Yi clan, and they ordered Yizidu to develop the power of Yi clan here. Over the past few hundred years, this coastal plain had devoured dozens of ambitious sons of Tianfang Kingdom's aristocratic families. In this place, the spring was dry and filled with sand and dust, the summer was hot and filled with typhoons, and the autumn was filled with endless thunderstorms. Just when the tail of the autumn had passed, the winter snowstorm would come roaring from the snowfield in the north. The extreme cold was strong enough to freeze the bigger rocks into the tiniest grains of sand on the beach. On top of that, there would be aquatic monsters that came to the shore from time to time, and there would be demons and devils that came from the ocean occasionally. The natural environment of this damned place was as beautiful as hell. However, Yizuru had laid down his foundation here, and built a city here. After several decades of development, Purple Leaf City had become the most dazzling pearl in the easternmost area of Great Yen Dynasty. No matter it was the mountain traders who traveled from south to north, the treasure traders who traveled in and out of the Great Eastern Ocean, or the slave traders who were armed to the teeth like an army, all of them had taken Purple Leaf City as their resting station. As the saying goes, money keeps rolling in, and money keeps rolling in. Purple Leaf City was such a place now. Because it was located in a very dangerous location, and the surrounding environment was very harsh, it was 10,000 miles away from Purple Leaf City to the west. Therefore, it had become the only city of Great Yen Dynasty within the circumference of 10,000 miles. That was why it could earn more money than Little Meng City. The specialty products of the Great Eastern Ocean were many times more abundant and precious than those of Meng Mountains. Therefore, those who visited this place were the best merchants and the strongest caravans of Great Yen Dynasty. From the coastal plain where the Purple Leaf City was located, a blade-shaped peninsula abruptly extended from the mainland, stretching for 8,000 miles in a straight line towards the southeast. The place where the peninsula connected to the mainland was the widest part of the peninsula, which was only about 380 kilometers wide. The further it extended into the sea, the narrower the peninsula became. At the tip of the southeastern part of the peninsula, it suddenly became only 100 miles wide. Looking from the sky, the nameless peninsula was like a sharp knife piercing the Eastern Ocean from the main continent. The peninsula was full of high mountains and precipitous ridges, and it was rare to see a few small plains that could be used for farming. The mountain was covered with a black pine forest that no one had entered for tens of thousands of years. The tallest black pine tree in the forest was an iron-bone dragon-skinned black pine tree, which was at least 10 meters thick and over 280 meters tall. It was hard to tell how many precious herbs were growing in the forest, how many powerful wild beasts and birds were being bred here, and how many mountain spirits and water ghosts were hiding in the forest. Currently, at the tip of the southeastern part of the peninsula, at a place less than 10 miles away from the ocean, 100 tall and burly longbow men, the tallest of whom was 1,500 feet tall, were seen carrying one small hill after another, running back and forth on a spacious flat land. While burping, they kept glancing left and right, and whenever they saw a protruding spot, they would run over, grab the small hill on their shoulders and smash it into the ground. Only when they smashed the ground so deeply into the ground that it was as smooth as a mirror did they leave contentedly. After being ravaged by these longbow men, the flat land, which measured about 50 miles in both width and length, had sunk several tens of feet deep into the ground. The ground had become a few times stronger than steel, and had been hammered into a foundation that looked like an iron plate. There were several tens of thousands of burly men carrying huge baskets on their backs. Inside the baskets were countless sand, wood chips, metal powders, jade fragments, and many other miscellaneous items that belonged to either 5 elements or not. They threw these miscellaneous items onto the ground and piled them up into small mounds. After that, these longbow men would run over and happily smash these mounds with small hills, smashing them into the ground as well. Among these miscellaneous items, there were also sulfur, black dog blood, human feces, pig feces, and many other strange things that were either dirty or not, and the amount of them was frighteningly huge. Together with materials that belonged to or didn't belong to the 5 elements, this foundation would have an extremely strong natural defense against the 5 elements escape technique. Even those Yin gods and wild ghosts wouldn't be able to escape freely through the ground. This was an evil technique recorded in Scroll of Stealing, which was specially used to break escape magic of 5 elements or escape magic of Yin ghosts. Unless it was an innate escape magic of 5 elements, or a few of the few great divine abilities, escape magic of spirit, when faced with this kind of mixed materials, no matter how hard one tried to perform incantation gestures, recite spells, and change the escape magic, one would never be able to travel through this place freely. Most of the things recorded in the scroll of stealing were all sorts of strange escape techniques, techniques that could break through the restrictive spells and sneak into someone's house. Of course, the main point of the scroll of stealing was how to prevent someone from sneaking into one's house easily. An expert thief would naturally know how to better guard against thieves. Apart from these busy laborers, there were also several dozens of female officials from the inner court, each clad in a long black dress and wearing a tall crown on their head. They were holding various tools in their hands, surveying the terrain and drawing the blueprint of a magnificent city on a huge blueprint. Each and every one of these female officials was young and beautiful, with beautiful faces and slim bodies. Every single one of them was a great beauty that could only be found among 10,000. On top of that, each and every one of them was smart and capable. They could survey the terrain, draw the blueprint of scale, and design the various functional parts of the city. Their attainments in this field were no weaker than the craftsmen who had spent their whole life building a city. Apart from these female officials, there were also many young female officials, who were dressed similarly, riding on sword beams and flying back and forth. Holding long whips in their hands, they were supervising the laborers to work hard. Occasionally, someone would slack off, and they would immediately lash out with the whips. Using the whips made from the skin of great serpents, they would leave a foot-deep mark on the ground. It was more than enough to frighten the laborers, and they dared not to slack off even for a moment. In the mountains far away, there were also some female officials, together with a large number of imperial eunuchs, supervising large groups of laborers who were digging rocks and logs, collecting all kinds of building materials. In some valleys further away, there were also female officials supervising the laborers, who were digging mines and excavating underground metal ores. Then, they would forge furnaces in the valleys, and forge all kinds of metal ingots for future use. There were a total of 3,000 female officials in Chichi, who were carefully trained by Great Yen Dynasty's imperial court. Each of them had the ability to govern an entire city, and when these 3,000 female officials were gathered together, they had the administrative ability to govern an entire vassal kingdom. However, their current status was just the personal belongings of Princess Xianglu. In the future, once Princess Xianglu got married, these 3,000 young and beautiful female officials, whose cultivation base was at the realm of Xiantian and above, would all become the dowry girls of Princess Xianglu. Among them, they would be able to select 108 concubines of the future Princess Zhongli's future husband. Looking at these female officials who were working diligently, on the peak of a lofty mountain several tens of miles away, where he could overlook this flatland, Wu Qi was frowning and sighing. 3,000 young and beautiful girls, each with a belly full of knowledge and professional knowledge, but now, their fate was tied to Wu Qi. When they were classified as Princess Zhongli's personal belongings, and followed Wu Qi to this peninsula to prepare for the construction of the city, they had been branded with Wu Qi's brand, and could never get rid of it for the rest of their lives. Damn you, Yu Xian. I've only given you 30 cities as a bribe, and asked you to select some capable men for me. But, you actually brought out all the female officials specially trained by Great Yen Dynasty. Wu Qi scolded someone who was far away in Ji City, his eyes almost dripping with blood. Dedication, he was too damn dedicated. Yu Xian, this old fellow, once you gave him a bribe, as long as he accepted it, he would definitely help you get the job done beautifully. Not only did he double the amount of resources that Wu Qi asked for, he had even given Wu Qi the men that Wu Qi asked for, he had also done his best to select a group of the most capable and reliable men in Ji City for Wu Qi. These female officials were taken into the inner court since they were born, and they were given an elite education and brainwashing education since they were young. Once they came of age, as long as they acknowledged their master, their souls and lives would be completely given to their master. Originally, these female officials were the ones who were given to the members of Great Yen Dynasty when the members of Imperial clan got married. For example, when a prince or a princess married a prince, they would be rewarded with a batch of female officials to manage their mansions. In the end, Yu Xian, this dedicated old fellow, had given this batch of 3,000 female officials to Wu Qi, and had all acknowledged Princess Xianglu as their master. 3,000 administrative experts. Good, that was indeed good. But, When it came to 3,000 young and beautiful administrative experts who would be his dowry in the future, Wu Qi felt something was not right. It had been quite some time since he arrived in this world, but Wu Qi still could not accept some of the things in this damned place. For example, the human medicine that Lu Qingfeng had to consume every single day, and the practice of cultivating human beings like objects, and then giving them away as objects. But, with these 3,000 female officials, the 100,000 imperial prison soldiers brought by Princess Zhanglu from Garden of Zhanglu, and the 300,000 hard laborers who were sent here through teleportation formations, Wu Qi no longer had to worry about the construction of the city. For the past 2 months, he had been watching these hard laborers, under the guidance of these female officials, slowly tidying up the foundation of the city, preparing to build the first city that belonged to Wu Qi in the future, the first city that truly belonged to Wu Qi. Who cares? If I give all 3,000 women to someone in the future, it will be a great gift. Wu Qi, who was having a headache, did not want to pay any more attention to these messy things. He gave a glance at Princess Zhanglu, who was flying all over the place with several dozens of guards and serving ladies, giving orders to all the workers. He shook his head, then fished out a Yin deity from the spirit breeding ring, whose cultivation base was equivalent to early-stage nascent divinity realm. A stream of divine flame of order sprayed out from the Yin deity. The Yin deity howled miserably, then its true spirit fled into the world and was reincarnated. Meanwhile, its enormous and pure soul energy was melted into a clump of pure soul essence, which was then swallowed by a beam of light that shot out from between Wu Qi's brows. This was the last Yin deity among the several hundred he captured in Meng Mountains. With the help of these Yin deities, the current strength of Wu Qi's soul was equivalent to the soul will of a few early-stage nascent divinity cultivators. 18 statues of celestial fiends were seen hovering in front of Wu Qi in a straight line. After spending over 2 months of preparation, it was time to refine them. Chapter 272. Among the 18 celestial fiend puppets, the strongest one had the same cultivation base as its master, and could only be controlled by splitting the soul of its master. Wu Qi fiddled with the celestial fiend puppet he obtained from Chu Ping, sending a thread of divine will into it. The heavy celestial fiend puppet was easily penetrated by Wu Qi's divine will. What he saw was an empty interior, with only a large amount of dark red fiend energy wheeling and twisting around it. Although it was called a fiend energy, it did not have the bloody and murderous aura emanating from Xiang Yu's body. It was just a pure energy that was filled with the aura of combat. Similar to the natural energies, it did not contain any negative consciousness, but was a pure energy that came from combat. In that empty space, there were countless primordial divine runes of various sizes circling around. When Wu Qi linked the runes together, he found that it was a technique on how to refine these puppets. According to Chu Ping, by splitting a thread of his soul and attaching it to the puppets, he would be able to control them freely with his own blood essence. But, it was just the most superficial method of refining them. Only when it was combined with the heavenly Tao myriad fiend's spirit incantation could he truly control these celestial fiend puppets at will. The spirit incantation also provided him with the technique on how to upgrade these puppets in the future, so that they could improve their strength, blood refinement with fiend flame, devouring all things. Wu Qi read the spirit incantation at a glance, and was both surprised and delighted to find that when this spirit incantation was combined with the 18 celestial fiend puppets, as long as he was willing to spend a huge amount of time and materials, he would be able to upgrade them to an unimaginable level. In the future, even if Wu Qi could attain the level of divine gold immortal, these celestial fiend puppets would also have a suitable technique to gradually upgrade them to the level of divine gold immortal, instead of only having the overall strength of 36th tier heaven immortal like what Chu Ping said. Perhaps, the reason why Chu Ping gave up on these puppets was because their future was too bright and brilliant, but the time, energy, and materials they consumed were too huge. For each puppet to upgrade to a higher level, the amount of spirit, energy, and materials consumed was at least 10 times that of the cultivator himself. In order for all 18 celestial fiend puppets to break through at the same time, they would need to consume 180 times the amount of spirit, energy, and resources. Any cultivator with a normal mind would not choose these celestial fiend puppets. Even if they could kill a divine gold immortal in the future, they would never choose these useless puppets. 180 times the amount of resources was enough to raise his cultivation to an unimaginable realm. Why would he need to rely on external forces? For cultivators, any cultivation resource was extremely precious. Most probably, the reason why Chu Ping did not mention the heavenly Tao of myriad fiends incantation to Wu Qi was because he did not think Wu Qi had the ability to obtain so many precious materials to refine these celestial fiend puppets. Even Chu Ping himself did not have the confidence to refine these puppets, let alone Wu Qi, who was not even worthy of Chu Ping's attention. You really have eyes but failed to recognize a treasure. I wonder which almighty expert is bored enough to create these freakish things. For other cultivators, they are simply a burden. But for me, who has inherited the scroll of stealing, they are the best magical treasures for self-defense and life-saving. Wu Qi's eyes shone brightly. Other cultivators might not have sufficient cultivation materials and resources, but for the inheritor of the scroll of stealing, it was not a problem at all. On the contrary, due to the uniqueness of the scroll of stealing, Wu Qi was destined to be alone most of the time. Most of the time, his strength alone was not enough to handle everything. With these 18 celestial fiend puppets by his side, as long as their cultivation base could gradually improve along with his strength, it would be equivalent to having 19 Wu Qi working together at any time. As a result, these puppets were the best trump card for him. Laughing loudly, Wu Qi recited the incantation silently. He gave up on the superficial blood sacrifice technique told to him by Chu Ping, and instead, focused all his attention on circulating the complete version of the soul-splitting spell of the heavenly Tao of myriad fiends incantation. Over and over again, he kept reciting the incantation, gradually sending a thread of divine will into these celestial fiend puppets. As the power of Wu Qi's divine will was gradually injected into these puppets, they began to emit a dazzling light, and gradually, their bodies grew larger and larger. From the length of 1 foot, they gradually grew to the same height as Wu Qi. An immense dark red aura of combat spread out from their bodies, while a buzzing noise was heard coming from within them. A feeling of having their flesh and blood fused with Wu Qi rose up spontaneously. All of a sudden, Wu Qi, who was reciting the incantation, let out a miserable howl, holding his head with both hands and rolling violently on the mountaintop. His soul, which was as strong as a few early-stage nascent divinity cultivators, was chopped into 19 pieces by an invisible force. One of them retained about 10% of his original soul, while the other 90% was evenly divided into 18 parts. When the 18 parts of his soul were thrown into these celestial fiend puppets, they immediately condensed into a soul pearl the size of a fist, hovering inside the bodies of these puppets. Countless runes began to light up on the smooth surface of these puppets. Abruptly, the bodies of these puppets turned dark, and the void within 10 miles of circumference suddenly lost its luster, as if a black hole had collapsed. The surrounding natural energies began to fluctuate violently, while the natural energies within 1,000 miles kept gathering towards these puppets amidst loud swooshing noises. Wu Qi howled miserably as tears and snot sprayed out from his eyes and nose at the same time. With great effort, he managed to struggle to his feet. He pulled out the sword of greedy wolf and made a fierce cut on his wrist. Immediately, a large amount of blood essence sprayed out and injected into these celestial fiend puppets. As Wu Qi kept injecting his blood essence into them, the metallic luster on the puppet's surface suddenly became brighter and brighter, gradually turning the same as the flesh and blood of a real human being. At the same time, the color of their bodies began to change. Their pitch-black metallic bodies quickly turned the same as the skin of a human, with human hair, skin, and even the patterns on their surface looking exactly the same. Their eyes were deep and emotionless, and within their eye sockets that shone with a dark red gleam, eyeballs that looked exactly like a human had grown out. On their sharp claws that looked like daggers, fingernails that looked exactly like a human had grown out. As Wu Qi's blood essence kept flowing into these celestial fiend puppets, they gradually looked exactly like Wu Qi. Even their eyebrows and the fine hair at the corner of their mouths looked exactly the same. Wu Qi felt that 18 bottomless pits were crazily sucking his blood essence. His blood essence kept flowing into these bottomless pits, and gradually, he felt that he had gained some extra bodies. However, the feeling of these bodies was vague, as his soul could not control them well yet. The speed of the blood essence being extracted was getting faster and faster, to the point where Wu Qi could no longer control it himself, as the puppets were draining his blood essence. You are indeed an extraordinary treasure of the Fiend League. If not for the fact that I have prepared beforehand, perhaps my blood essence would have been completely extracted by you. Clenching his jaws tightly, Wu Qi fished out a vat of blood essence, and like a whale sucking in water, he sucked the vat of blood essence, which weighed nearly 5,000 kilograms, into his body. His dry and empty body quickly digested the blood essence. Every single cell in his body was like a parched desert, quickly devouring the blood essence, then turning it into Wu Qi's own energy essence and rushing out. The emergence of a massive amount of new energy essence had satisfied the requirement of these celestial fiend puppets for their master's blood essence. They actually opened their mouths and let out loud, satisfied laughter. Looking at the 18 men who looked exactly like him, laughing complacently while wantonly devouring his blood essence, Wu Qi could not help but curse the 18 generations of ancestors of the person who created these 18 celestial fiend puppets. A massive amount of profound aura rushed out of these puppets' bodies, as more information was branded into Wu Qi's spiritual ocean. Apart from the combat weapon incantation used to refine these puppets, more information about these puppets kept coming into his spiritual ocean. These information could only be obtained by the person who personally refined them. No matter how strong the divine will of others was, they could only obtain the combat weapon incantation, and could not obtain these obscure information. After Chu Ping obtained these puppets, he only studied the method of their production, and whether the combat weapon incantation could be used to control divine undead weapons, but he had never personally performed a blood sacrifice on these puppets. As a result, only Wu Qi could obtain these information now. From these information, Wu Qi learned that in the current territory of Great Chu, in a cave deep in the mountain where Chu Ping found these celestial fiend puppets, there used to be a sect with the legacy of ancient immortals, which specialized in the cultivation of various divine abilities of the Fiend League. These puppets were personally crafted by the 18 strongest patriarchs of that sect, passed down to the disciples of the later generations, and used to safeguard the fate of the sect. Among these puppets, not only was there a combat weapon incantation used to refine them, there was also a divine ability of the Fiend League, called the Celestial Fiend Battle the Heaven Script. It was an ancient cultivation technique that focused on cultivating the fleshly body, aiming to turn the fleshly body into a saint, and was also prepared for these puppets. After refining these puppets with the Heavenly Tao combat weapon incantation and providing them with sufficient blood essence, they would be able to transform into a half-puppet, half-fleshly body. They would also be able to form meridians that were exactly the same as human beings, allowing them to cultivate the celestial fiend battle the heaven script and gradually improve their strength. On top of that, they would be able to devour all kinds of rare natural treasures to strengthen their bodies. As a result, the future of these puppets was far beyond the limit that Wu Qi learned from the combat weapon incantation. Theoretically, as long as they cultivated the celestial fiend battle the heaven script, and were nourished by endless natural treasures, each of these puppets had the possibility of becoming one of the strongest experts in the entire universe. After a brief moment of pondering, Wu Qi waved his left hand. Immediately, 18 bean-sized innate earth element energies shot out from the earth element dragon's scale shield and fused into the bodies of these celestial fiend puppets. One after another, the puppets let out joyful laughter as they hastily sat cross-legged on the ground and slowly exercised the celestial fiend battle the heaven script, circulating the innate earth element energies through their bodies over and over again, cleansing the newly born meridians. The surrounding natural energies quickly rushed into the bodies of these celestial fiend puppets. Under the control of Wu Qi's soul pearl, these puppets gradually formed into a dark red Jin Dan in their dantian, glinting with a layer of golden light. Clearly, they had reached the level of early-stage Jin Dan realm, which was equivalent to Wu Qi's cultivation base. A few days later, these puppets finally retracted their cultivation technique and rose to their feet. With a thought in Wu Qi's mind, these puppets abruptly turned translucent like phantoms, then walked into Wu Qi's shadow one after another, fusing into Wu Qi's shadow. Wu Qi felt that there were 18 extra clones of himself sharing the same body with him. As long as he willed it, these 18 clones could leave his body at any time and transform into celestial fiend puppets to fight with other people. These puppets were living in his body, breathing together with him, sharing his blood, flesh, and energy essence. Taking a deep breath, Wu Qi ended the refinement of the celestial fiend puppets, then rose to his feet joyfully. Far off in the distance, a beam of blue light shot up into the sky, from which came the fat catfish flood dragon, swaying her huge body. Chapter 273. Water droplets fell from the sky, accompanied by a long cry that sounded like a cow or a baby, but not like a dragon's roar. Slowly, catfish flood dragon's body shrunk and transformed into a human. Stepping on a dark cloud, she flew swaggeringly towards Wu Qi, shouting from a distance, "Brother Wu Qi, I've brought you a letter. Hee, I've already handed over the official documents to the few dragon kings of the Great Eastern Ocean. Now, the 2,500,000 miles of this ocean is my territory." Glancing left and right, catfish flood dragon saw Wu Qi standing on the peak of the mountain from afar. Without hesitation, she flew towards him with a cloud. Meanwhile, Great Yan, Great Chu, and Great Wei had sent out all their elites, led by the emperors of the 3 dynasties to Mount He. Princess Zhang Li's eyes shone brightly, and Wu Qi felt his heart itch. Catfish Flood Dragon blinked her eyes and stared blankly at both of them. Catfish Flood Dragon did not have a deep impression of the relics of immortals. Be it spirit treasures or spirit items, when she fought with others, she mostly used her physical strength, and rarely used divine abilities or magical treasures. Princess Zhang Li's eyes shone brightly. She waved her fist excitedly and shouted, "We'll go too. All the treasures. At least some of them should be ours." Baring her fangs and brandishing her claws, Princess Zhang Lu let out a shrill laugh and said, "The construction of the city will be handled by those 3,000 female officials of the inner court, and 100,000 imperial guards, together with the protection of the aquatic demons under Catfish Flood Dragon's command. Zi Xian is going to seize the treasures of the immortals, and Zi Xian wants those treasures." In the ocean below, thousands of demons transformed from various fishes and sea beasts could be seen, their cultivation bases ranging from nascent Soul Realm to Xiantian Realm. Each of them was rubbing their palms and rubbing their palms, stirring up waves and mist as they threw hostile glances at the busy construction site. Immortal might. With great difficulty, Wu Qi spat out 2 words. Wu Qi turned the page of the letter and continued reading. The change of the battle situation in Meng Mountains was really unexpected. The fact that Great Wei had secretly colluded with Great Yan and Great Chu, and joined forces to launch a surprise attack on Daqin was beyond everyone's expectation. But when did Great Zhao collude with Daqin? Looking at the familiar names on the letter, Xiao Sheng, Lian Pe, Lin Xiangru, etc., Wu Qi felt his scalp go numb. Just as Wu Qi was about to discuss the matter of the immortal ruins with Princess Zhang Lu, a huge explosion suddenly sounded in the distant eastern sky, where the sky and the water met. Suddenly, a large cloud pattern spread out in the sky, and a white cloud trail shot straight in the direction of Wu Qi's group. Due to the sudden changes in the ruins, the higher-ups of the 5 nations had already focused their attention on the ruins. The sinful prince of Daqin, Huhai, the emperor of Great Zhao, Zhao Sheng, and the others had already led a large number of experts and cultivators to the depths of Yi Mountain, which was the border between Great Wei and Great Zhao. They were prepared to fight for the magical treasures that had flowed out of the ruins. This is... Wu Qi was struck dumb. It took Lu Qingfeng about 1,000 words to describe the brutality of the war. As a large number of cultivators had joined the war, the fighting pattern of all the armies had become unpredictable. An army of 100,000 men could appear in front of another city several thousand miles away at any time. There was no front line or rear line, and no main direction of attack. Wherever those cultivators could reach, a brand new teleportation formation could appear at any time, and tens of thousands of soldiers could be assembled at any time. When Princess Xianglu read these words, she could not help but twitch her lips and say, Lu Bue. Nice? Every day, tens of thousands of soldiers were killed or wounded during the war between the 5 dynasties. A single strike from an earth immortal of nascent soul realm could shatter tens of thousands of iron armors. Meng Mountains had turned into a bloody hell, and the brutality of the war between the 5 dynasties was rarely seen. Qingfeng once had nightmares about the scene of mountains of corpses and seas of blood, but that could not describe the current battlefield in Meng Mountains. My dear brother Wu Qi, I'm here to see Xianan. Is the construction of the city at the shore of the Great Eastern Ocean going smoothly? Senior Catfish Flood Dragon is heading to the Great Eastern Ocean with the official document of Wanying Dragon King, applying to be the Lord of an Ocean. If she succeeds, it will be of great help to my dear brother in building the city. Also, Lord Xiansheng, the son of Wanying Dragon King, has also brought 300,000 soldiers to the Great Eastern Ocean, hoping to live next to Senior Catfish Flood Dragon. With that, my dear brother will have another great support. Princess Xianglu had also flown up into the sky with a gust of fragrant wind, and quickly threw herself into Wu Qi's arms. She had just twisted her body a few times, but before she could act coquettishly to Wu Qi, Catfish Flood Dragon had already descended from the sky on a cloud while laughing. She fished out a letter from under her sleeve and gave it to Wu Qi, shaking her head and saying, It's terrible, it's really terrible. The war in Meng Mountains has turned it into a river of blood, and the land is filled with corpses. I've followed brother Wu Qi to come here to avoid the calamity. You are indeed a wise and mighty man. She wagged her big head complacently, then cried out excitedly, This is the territory of that 3-headed shark who was killed a few days ago. Now that he has been killed, it is only right and proper for me to take over his territory. 10 days ago, the Great Qin Army, together with Great Zhao's Buyun iron-armored earth-splitting rhinoceros cavalry, attacked Great Yan Kingdom from 10 different directions. Great Yan, Great Chu, and Great Wei split up their armies to encircle them, and as a result, 127 cities were conquered by the enemy. The imperial court of Great Yan was in an uproar, and rumors were spreading among the common people. The prices of goods in the market skyrocketed, especially for food, oil, salt, and many other things. 15 days ago, the Great Wei army, led by Great Wei's General Pang Wan, launched a surprise attack on Daqin from the flank. The 3 dynasties joined forces and attacked Qin's field headquarters. The great general of Chu, Xiang Yu, returned to the scene, commanding the mighty army of Xiang clan and launching a fierce assault on Qin's army. He did not stop there for long, and killed 108 great generals of Qin army, as well as 37 members of Qin imperial clan. He also severely wounded great generals Wang Jian, Meng Tian, and some other important ministers of Qin army, Su Fu and Li Si, were all wounded by him. The ruins of immortals. Zi Xian. When Wu Qi finished reading the letter, he shoved it into the black dragon spirit ring. A random magical treasure that flew out from the ring was actually a lower-grade spirit item. A spirit item, only a magical treasure with an item spirit guarding it could be called a spirit item. For cultivators, even a lower-grade spirit item was much more valuable than an upper-grade magical treasure. Once a spirit item was subdued, it would automatically protect its owner and attack the enemy. However, a magical treasure did not have such a function. When the 3 dynasties joined forces and were about to break through Qin's field headquarters, Great Zhao's iron cavalry broke through and launched a surprise attack from the back of the allied army. Meng Fortress and Meng City were broken through one after another. The emperor of Great Zhao, Zhao Sheng, personally led the Buyun iron-armored earth-splitting rhinoceros cavalry and launched a fierce attack on the allied army, coordinating with Qin's army from a distance. Great Zhao's brave generals, Zhao Shi, Zhao Kuo, Lian Pe, Li Mu, and civil officials, Lin Xiangru, Gong Sun Long, Mao Sui, Su Dai, had an astonishing cultivation base. With the combined forces of Daqin and Great Zhao, their power was not weaker than the allied army of the 3 dynasties. Cultivators fought and killed each other, and armies fought and attacked each other. With the help of cultivators and teleportation formations, the natural barriers such as great rivers and great mountains had become nothing but decorations. Attacking and controlling the teleportation formations had become the main mode of the battle. A spirit pressure that was a few times stronger than the combined strength of 10 whinnying dragon kings came crashing down from several thousand miles away, making Wu Qi and his company feel suffocated. Those ordinary mortals who were working could not sense it, but all those who had the cultivation base of Xiantian realm and above, no matter it was the lady officials from the inner court or the imperial army eunuchs, felt as if there was a huge rock pressing on their chest, making it hard for them to breathe. If it were some other ordinary mortals who dared to build a city so close to the ocean, these demons would have long rushed up and devoured all the laborers working on the construction site. However, since the man who built the city here was the friend of the owner of this 2.5 million miles wide ocean, these demons could only stare at the man on the shore while drooling. None of them had the courage to jump up to the man. Because of the ruins, the armies of the 5 dynasties had stopped their large-scale military operations. Most of their elite soldiers were attracted by the ruins of immortals, and were rushing to He Mountain. It was not hard to imagine that a fierce battle between a dragon and a tiger would take place in He Mountain. Compared to the battle between millions of soldiers, it would be a few times more brutal. Mo City had been relocated to He Mountain as well. This weapon of war from Mo sect, which had a strong defense and a frightening offensive strength, had become the biggest reliance of the allied army of the 3 dynasties. Even the commander's tent of the allied army of the 3 dynasties had been set up in Mo City. Wu Qi had no idea how Lu Qingfeng managed to escape from Meng City in such a miserable state. Fortunately, before Wu Qi left, he had set up quite a number of small teleportation formations for escaping. Otherwise, with the bizarre appearance of Great Zhao's army, perhaps none of the Great Yan officials in Meng City would have been able to escape. Meanwhile, Wu Qi was smiling as he pinched Princess Zhang Li's ear and said, "Zi Xian, Lu Buwei is guarding Ji City. I'll need your protection when the time comes." In order to cope with the crisis, His Majesty has sent the left Prime Minister and Lu Buwei back to Ji City to oversee the imperial court. They will be responsible for managing the state affairs, managing the resources from all over Great Yan, stabilizing the price of goods, and coping with the crisis. Lu Buwei has the sole power in Ji City. My dear brother, please do not return to Ji City easily. If you have to return, please remember to bring Princess Zhangli with you. Although Lu Buwei was bold and reckless, he did not have the courage to openly attack and kill members of Great Yan imperial clan. Wu Qi breathed out a sigh and continued reading the letter. The letter was written with Lu Qingfeng's vigorous handwriting. Every stroke was like an iron blade or a silver hook, a sign of his great skill. For the past month, Ying Zheng, the Emperor of Daqin, has not come out. The Crown Prince of Daqin, Fu Su, and the Prince of Xin, Hu Hai, have led the army to fight against Great Yan and Great Chu. After 13 consecutive battles, Great Yan had lost more than 1 million elite soldiers. The war was very tragic. Qingfeng was in charge of the logistics of Westfield headquarters, filling out the funeral documents and sending them to the families of the soldiers who died in the war. He had been so busy that all his advisors were nearly exhausted. In just 10 days, 1 million soldiers had died in the war. It was a cruel scene. Both Wu Qi and Princess Zhangli were taken aback. There had been no news from Ji City for the past 2 months, and Catfish Flood Dragon said that the war had turned into a river of blood. It was obvious that the war had entered a critical state. Hastily, Wu Qi tore open the envelope and fished out the letter, skimming through it. Behind the trail of white cloud, a large sheet of 5-colored light was seen shooting out, from which countless colorful petals were shooting out and showering down, causing the trail of white cloud to wobble and crumble. On the other hand, the powerful weapons of war from Mo sect, especially the mighty Mo City, had become the nightmare of Daqin and Great Zhao's army. Wherever the Mo City went, countless soldiers of Daqin and Great Zhao were turned into ashes. Even those nascent divinity cultivators dared not to face the attack of the Mo City head-on. While Lu Qingfeng was writing the letter, a strange change suddenly occurred in the ancient immortal ruins located at the border between Great Wei and Great Zhao. Suddenly, a small gap was opened in the tightly sealed ancient immortal defense mechanism, from which a great amount of immortal energy of excellent quality leaked out, and a flying sword of lower-grade spirit item level flew out from it. It was luckily found by a human immortal from Jin Dan who was stationed near the ruins by Great Wei. On top of that, Su Dai was the elder brother of Great Yan's imperial advisor, Su Qin. He was an expert in the art of mountains, rivers, and geography, as well as the art of divination. The fall of Meng City was caused by Su Dai, who cracked the ground and broke through the defensive mechanism of Meng City. When I was stationed in Meng City, I was fortunate enough to receive a large number of spirit talismans from my younger brother, and I even planted a teleportation formation in the mayor's mansion. With that, I managed to escape from the enemy with my trusted subordinates. Chapter 274. Inside a planetary ship that measured less than 10 feet long and 4 feet wide, Jiang Qingzi was cursing at the top of his voice, "Han Shao, you old fogey. You are also a grandmaster, but how could you sneak attack me, a junior, from the back without caring about your reputation? You. Standing 8 feet tall and clad in a green Taoist robe, Jiang Qingzi had a handsome face and a graceful bearing. But now, he looked like a pitiful young girl who had been ravaged by 1,000 perverts. Jiang Qingzi's left arm was shattered, and his white bones were splattered all over his body. There was a hole the size of a bowl on his right chest. Through the hole, Jiang Qingzi's pink lungs could be seen moving rapidly. Severely wounded, Jiang Qingzi was holding a small spirit flag in his hand, constantly sending out beams of spirit light into the planetary ship, controlling it to move forward at high speed in the vast void. After spending over 2,000 years of arduous cultivation, Jiang Qingzi had already attained the cultivation base of peak stage nascent soul realm, and breaking through the realm of nascent divinity was just a matter of time. Therefore, he was given this planetary ship by the seniors of his sect, which could allow any cultivator below the realm of heaven immortal to travel across the starry sky. A planetary ship could travel across the starry sky, from one planet to another. The distance between planets could easily be hundreds of millions of miles. Therefore, the speed of a planetary ship was at least 100 times faster than an ordinary beam of light. In order to craft a planetary ship, not only did it require a master-level item crafting skill, it also required a great amount of precious materials. In Liyuan Galaxy, which was the most desolate place in Minor Heavenly Circle realm, a sect usually owned less than 20 planetary ships. If not because Jiang Qingzi was an expert in identifying all kinds of spirit herbs, and had spent years searching for spirit herbs to concoct pills for the sect, even though he had already formed his nascent divinity, he would not have the chance to enjoy this tiny shadow cloud. This was the planetary ship that Jiang Qingzi belonged to, the White Cloud Immortal Sect, a planetary ship that ranked in the top 5 in terms of speed, and was usually owned by the sect elders. Han Shao, you old fogey. You're old and shameless. Serves you right. You will die without any descendants, and your entire clan will be wiped out. Shadow Cloud vibrated violently once again, as several dozens of layers of defensive mechanisms were shattered by the 5-colored flowers that came rushing at them from behind. In just a blink of an eye, more than half of the defensive mechanisms were shattered. Jiang Qingzi gasped for breath as he hastily infused the last bit of his true essence into the spiritual flag in his hand and drove the star boat forward. About 100 miles behind Shadow Cloud, a faint green silhouette was chasing after it at a high speed. This silhouette was actually using his own body to fly in the vast starry sky. Compared to the Shadow Cloud planet ship, his speed was only slightly slower. To be able to use one's own magic power to fly through the vast starry sky was a divine ability that only heavenly immortals possessed. To be able to keep up with the speed of the star boat, he had to be a powerful celestial immortal. After chasing for a short distance, the cyan man's palm suddenly spurted out a large amount of multicolored light, then countless colorful petals spun at a high speed and darted out. The petals rapidly caught up to the star boat and exploded violently. Within the blinding light created by the explosion of the petals, numerous beams of light rotated at an alarming speed, madly tearing at the restrictive spell formations on the star boat like blades of light. The Shadow Cloud planet ship suddenly swayed, and its flying speed abruptly decreased by a notch. After that, it picked up speed again, and continued to flee in a sorry state. However, in this short period of time, the green silhouette had closed the distance of several tens of miles, and was now less than 100 miles away from Shadow Cloud planet ship. Jiang Qingzi coughed out a mouthful of blood. Looking disheveled, he turned to look at the green silhouette behind him and roared furiously, "Han Shao, you old fogey! Don't you fear that my ancestral master will come after you? Why you, although you are a supremely powerful expert among all heaven immortals of 36th tier, my ancestral master is about to break through to 35th tier heaven immortal, and his magic power is at least 10 times stronger than yours. Do you really have the guts to offend White Cloud Immortal Sect?" The green silhouette laughed sinisterly and said, "Cut the crap. If I kill you and destroy all the evidence, who would know that I'm the one who did it? Since White Cloud Immortal Sect dared to kill my only beloved son, you should be prepared to face my revenge." Over the years, at least 100 disciples of White Cloud Immortal Sect have died in my hands. What's the big deal about adding you to the list? Jiang Qingzi was taken aback. Are you the one who killed all the disciples of White Cloud Immortal Sect over the years? He cried angrily. The green silhouette said coldly, I am the one who killed all the disciples of White Cloud Immortal Sect. My poor son fell in love with a female disciple who had just joined White Cloud Immortal Sect, and kidnapped her to be his cultivation vessel. After 3 days of plucking, he was brutally killed by someone from White Cloud Immortal Sect. I hate him, I hate him. I don't have any disciples, and he is my only son. Since young, I doted on him more than my own life. Since you killed my only son, I'll definitely wipe out White Cloud Immortal Sect to avenge my beloved son. Then, he casually pointed his finger out, unleashing another large sheet of 5-colored light that shook Shadow Cloud. Jiang Qingzi coughed out a mouthful of blood, and nearly fainted inside the ship. He breathed out a long sigh, then laughed bitterly. Abruptly, he turned his head and looked at a starry sky that was emitting an ominous crimson cloud. Over there was the most notorious death zone in Liyuan Galaxy of Minor Heavenly Circle Realm, the Flaming Nether Ocean. This crimson cloud contained the acquired Red Yang Death Qi. Cultivators would never be able to absorb the Red Yang Death Qi. Once the Red Yang Death Qi seeped into their bodies, it would be like a mortal drinking a bucket of oil and then swallowing a mouthful of flame. Their entire bodies would quickly burn and turn into ashes. From time to time, the flaming nether ocean would spew out a very powerful reverse 3 solar soul-dispersing heavenly flame. Its temperature could melt gold and iron, and even a defensive magical treasure of excellent quality would be immediately turned into ashes when it touched the soul-dispersing heavenly flame. What was even more frightening was that the soul-dispersing heavenly flame had the ability to extinguish the nascent divinity of cultivators. Even if it was a gold immortal with a profound cultivation base who had the ability to shift the stars, if he was careless and touched by the soul-dispersing heavenly flame, he would have his soul disintegrated and perish on the spot. On top of that, the Red Yang Death energy could isolate the divine will of cultivators from probing. Even if it was a heaven immortal who entered the Red Yang Death energy, the range of his divine will would not exceed 10 miles. In this vast flaming nether ocean, which occupied nearly half of Liyuan Galaxy's starry sky, the range of divine will of 10 miles was no different from being blind with one's eyes open. With a slight carelessness, one would easily lose his sense of direction amidst this boundless yang energy of death, and be completely lost within it. Gazing at the perilous land that would make all the cultivators in Liyuan Galaxy turn pale at the mere mention of its name, Jiang Qingzi, who was forced into a dead end by Han Shao, clenched his jaws tightly, gave a strange howl as he drove Shadow Cloud and plunged into the land. A loud rumble rang out, as a large sheet of yang energy of death surged and splashed like water. In the blink of an eye, Shadow Cloud was completely devoured by the crimson cloud, vanishing without a trace. The green figure that Han Shao had transformed into was struck dumb. Suddenly, he bellowed furiously, Even if you have to flee into the netherworld today, I'll still kill you. Flaming nether ocean, why would I be afraid of it? Ha ha ha, 800 years ago, I was lucky enough to find a drop of innate abyss heavy water, and today, I can put it to good use. A glittering and translucent blue speck shot out from Han Zhao's mouth, instantly transforming into a thick and heavy blue halo that enveloped his entire body. A piercing cold air rolled and rolled out, freezing the large sheet of yang energy of death in front of him into an ice cube. Han Zhao snorted coldly, then fished out a star path positioning plate from under his sleeve. Clenching his jaws, he too plunged headlong into the flaming nether ocean. Less than 3 miles into the flaming nether ocean, Jiangqing Zi, who was in a flurry pulling out some medicinal pills and consuming them to heal his wounds, suddenly heard a loud noise coming from behind. He raised his head up abruptly, and saw a clump of blue light shrouding Han Zhao and chasing after him. Jiangqing Zi cried out in terror. Hastily, he waved the spirit flag and drove Shadow Cloud to move at top speed, turning it into a trail of white cloud and shooting forward. Never in Jiangqing Zi's wildest dreams did he expect that Han Zhao would really chase after him, and really enter this infamous land of perils in Liyuan Galaxy. He opened his mouth and swallowed a few immortal pills that could replenish his energies, then shouted and screamed as he drove the planetary ship forward at top speed, Han Zhao, you really put yourself in a perilous situation just to kill me? Fine, fine. Jiangqing Zi, I'm ready to risk it all. Let's die in here together. Making up his mind, Jiangqing Zi roared and yelled as he drove the planetary ship forward at top speed. He exercised a mystic technique of White Cloud Immortal Sect, burning his own blood essence and nascent soul, turning them into powerful energies and injecting them into the planetary ship. With the energies replenished, Shadow Cloud, which was flying at top speed to begin with, became even faster. As Han Zhao did not have a planetary ship with him, the distance between him and Jiangqing Zi, which was less than 3 miles, was gradually widened. Jiangqing Zi's nascent soul was enveloped by a ball of white flame, and his cultivation base was dropping from peak stage nascent soul realm to late stage nascent soul realm, and then from late stage to mid stage nascent soul realm. Jiangqing Zi felt like weeping, but had no tears. He raised his head and stared at the sky. The cultivation base of peak stage nascent soul realm that he had spent over 2,000 years in cultivating was forcibly burned away by the mystic technique of his sect, the White Cloud Flaming Sky Escape Art. However, with the powerful energies transformed from burning his nascent soul and blood essence, the speed of Shadow Cloud skyrocketed by a few times, and very soon, it left Han Zhao far behind. Jiangqing Zi kept flying forward in a straight line. His divine will had lost its effectiveness in the yang aura of death, and he could not tell which direction was north, south, east, and west. In short, he just kept fleeing crazily. When Jiangqing Zi's cultivation base dropped from peak stage nascent soul realm to early stage nascent soul realm, and was on the verge of his nascent soul disintegrating and falling back to Jin Dan realm, the yang aura of death in front of him suddenly vanished, revealing a small galaxy consisting of a dozen stars and several dozens of planets. All the other planets were barren planets with not even a blade of grass growing on them, but right next to a huge star, there was a planet of enormous size, several tens of thousands of times larger than all the other planets. It had a dense atmosphere, flat land, oceans, and lakes. It was a planet full of vitality. Jiangqing Zi, who had lost his consciousness, drove Shadow Cloud and slammed into the planet. Very soon, he had plunged into the planet's atmosphere. The yang aura of death behind him rippled, as Han Zhao, shrouded in a blue gleam and emanating a piercing cold air, sprung out and chased after Jiangqing Zi. The two of them crashed into the planet, one after the other. The Shadow Cloud planet ship even left behind a thin white trail that was several hundred miles long in the atmosphere. Han Zhao followed closely behind the planetary ship, constantly unleashing large sheets of colorful beams to attack the ship, causing it to sway and sway. The planetary ship streaked across the sky at top speed, and happened to pass right above the head of Wu Qi and his company. The enormous immortal pressure unleashed by Han Shao had alarmed all the cultivators and demons of Xiantian realm and above on this vast ocean, as well as on this continent. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.